Page 61. I'm Shi Feng. What do you want with me? Shi Feng asked, his big round eyes widening in genuine confusion. A young cultist bristled. Boy, show some respect. This is the Pope of our spirit hall. Bibi Dong waved the remark away with a graceful flick of her hand. No need to fuss, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Then she studied Shi Feng's face with quiet concern. What happened to you? Shi Feng gingerly touched his cheek, wincing. Got into a scuffle, he admitted. Bibi Dong's brow arched in mild surprise. She called over to one of her attendants. Bring him here for treatment. A moment later, a middle-aged woman with a serene smile stepped forward. As a contra-level healing soul master, she placed both hands lightly against Shi Feng's bruised skin. A soft, faint glow pulsed under her fingertips, and in an instant, the abrasions and swelling vanished. Shi Feng blinked at his reflection. His fair skin was spotless once more, his upturned nose perfectly formed, and his large black eyes bright and unclouded. He'd never before felt the touch of a soul master's healing, and the speed of her work left him awestruck. Bibi Dong studied him approvingly. All right, she said quietly, let's see your martial soul. Shi Feng took a steadying breath. He knew he had no choice but to comply. With a nod, he prepared to summon the power within. Standing behind Shi Feng was that hulking zombie, its skin a sickly green, its fangs long and menacing. Though it no longer cut a dramatic silhouette as it had at its awakening, its aura remained undeniably powerful. The assembled elders watched in stunned silence, gazing at Shi Feng's martial soul, a holy humanoid spirit unlike anything recorded in the centuries-long archives of the Wuhan Palace. In all those years, among tens of thousands of catalogued martial souls, not one had matched this peculiar form. Even so, the zombie's might struck the elders as no greater than that of other high-tier spirits, like the Clear Sky Hammer or the Blue Electric Tyrannosaurus Rex. To call it a god-level martial soul seemed a stretch. A few shook their heads, quietly lamenting that Bibi Dong's summons had been a waste of effort. They had witnessed the awe-inspiring power of an angel martial soul and found this undead warrior far less impressive. The disappointment showed plainly on Hulina's face as well. Within the Spirit Hall's Grand Council chamber, Bibi Dong had just disclosed the true nature of Shi Feng's martial soul. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled elders. Until now, they'd all believed he harbored a god-tier spirit. In reality, his martial soul was only supreme grade, and none could even say whether it outmatched Bibi Dong's own fox spirit. The higher the expectation, the deeper the disappointment. From the rear, Elder Chu couldn't contain his irritation. Your Holiness, this youth's martial spirit isn't god-tier by any measure, he snapped. He'd been on the brink of a breakthrough, pouring every ounce of focus into his cultivation, only to be summoned under false pretenses. A supreme-grade martial soul scarcely warranted the dispatch of a contra-level deacon, yet Bibi Dong had called in half a dozen of their most senior elders. Shi Feng met their crestfallen gazes with quiet detachment. He felt a flicker of awkwardness at disappointing them, but so what? If he refused the Spirit Hall's offer, no one could compel his loyalty. To his surprise, Bibi Dong betrayed no hint of regret. Instead, her smile only grew broader, as though she held a secret they had yet to uncover. What she beheld was unlike anything anyone else saw. Though initially disappointed that Shi Feng's martial soul wasn't a god-level spirit, her eyes immediately sharpened at the aura emanating from his zombie martial soul. It pulsed with an unmistakable, bloodthirsty, vengeful energy, dark, sinister, and yet strangely compelling. Bibi Dong, whose own spirits were the infamous twin spider demons, arguably the most malevolent on the Douluo continent, had never encountered anything quite like this. The more she sensed Shi Feng's martial soul, the more unnerved she felt, as if it harbored unfathomable secrets. A sudden intuition struck her. This spirit might be better suited for the mysterious inheritance she'd been pursuing than her own. She tilted her head and spoke softly, "Withdraw your martial soul." Obeying, Shi Feng retracted the zombie specter and asked, "May I step down?" Bibi Dong paused, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Not so fast. There's still much I wish to discuss." With a subtle nod toward the gathered elders, she added, "You may descend for now." Only Shi Feng, Bibi Dong, and Hulina remained in the vast hall. Shi Feng backed away, bewildered. "What is she planning to do?" he murmured, rubbing his arm as if to shake off a strange premonition. Hulina shared his confusion. Her master, Bibi Dong, the imperious leader of Wuhun Hall, had always been distant, severe, unapproachably regal. Yet before either disciple could react, Bibi Dong strode forward and gently lowered herself to one knee beside Shi Feng. All at once, the towering, awe-inspiring Iron Pope seemed to shrink. Bibi Dong reached out and brushed Shi Feng's hair back from his forehead, her touch as soft as a summer breeze. Her eyes, warm and tender, held a smile so genuine it took Shi Feng's breath away. Juliana covered her lips in shock, her fox-like eyes widening. Never had the Iron Pope shown such intimacy to even her dearest students. Shi Feng's heart pounded. Bibi Dong's kindness was so unexpected, so utterly sincere, that he felt tingles run through his entire body. Finally, she spoke in a voice both gentle and commanding. "I am the Grand Abbot of Wuhun Hall. Shi Feng, will you accept my guidance and become my disciple?" At that moment, Juliana nearly cried out in astonishment. The solemn, untouchable master had just offered apprenticeship to another, something she had never dared to imagine. She herself had endured the brutal training of the death concentration camp, and only after proving her worth was she accepted as Bibi Dong's disciple. Yet this child, Shi Feng, had won Bibi Dong's favor the very first time they met. A surge of inexplicable jealousy washed over Juliana. Why was Shi Feng so blessed? Shi Feng, however, felt an even deeper shock. To study under Bibi Dong meant to revere her as one's teacher, something he had never once imagined. Chapter 48. Farewell to Nodding City. Wuhundian's reputation as the second-best training ground for soul masters was unquestioned, so respected that no one dared claim the top spot. Yet attaching oneself to Bibi Dong as a master would inevitably set you against Tang San in the years to come. Shi Feng understood that without unrivaled talent or a power strong enough to defy fate itself, he might share the same tragic ending as Bibi Dong and Xiaoxue in the original legends. Hulina's eyes widened in disbelief as Bibi Dong looked on with polite expectation. Heart-pounding, Shi Feng swallowed hard. "May I decline?" he ventured. "Decline?" Hulina's gasp rang out. Her face flushed with outrage. How dare he refuse such an honor? Did he not realize what an opportunity this was? Bibi Dong's gentle smile faltered for a moment before she composed herself. "Why do you hesitate?" she asked, her voice still calm but tinged with genuine curiosity. Shi Feng forced a rueful expression, unwilling to reveal how torn he truly was. I just don't want to leave my hometown," he admitted. "Is that allowed?" At his words, Bibi Dong's eyes softened. She offered him a reassuring smile that was both warm and radiant. "Of course," she said, "when you grow stronger, you'll bring glory to Nodding City. Your achievements will be its pride." Shi Feng's heart fluttered. He glanced at Juliana, whose stern glare had softened into concern, and then back at Bibi Dong. Even if his path led away from home, perhaps one day he could return a hero and make everyone from Nodding City proud. Silence settled over the courtyard as the afternoon sun slipped toward the horizon. In that golden light, Shi Feng made his decision. "I accept," he said at last, voice steady. Bibi Dong's bright smile returned. "Very good," she replied. "Prepare yourself, Shi Feng. Your journey begins now." As the two of them spoke quietly about the formalities of apprenticeship, Shi Feng scanned the familiar rooftops and winding alleyways of Nodding City one last time. Tomorrow, he would depart for Wuhundian and leave behind the only home he'd ever known. Yet in his chest hope stirred, that this choice, though painful, would pave the way for a future where both he and his hometown could stand tall together under the same bright sky. "Follow me, and you'll soon realize this isn't a dream." "I really don't want to go," Shi Feng shot back, his voice trembling. In an instant, Bibi Dong's features hardened. A murderous chill radiated off her, enveloping him like an ice storm. "Then I'll kill you right here." Shi Feng felt as though he'd plunged into a frozen tomb. Never, in his wildest nightmares, had he imagined Bibi Dong so ruthless, unwilling to spare even her own child. He had no choice. If he refused, he'd be dead before he could blink. Yet yielding meant heading straight to Holy Soul Village, where Tang Hao's battered body couldn't possibly mount a rescue. His old injuries kept him from standing in a prolonged fight, and any battle there would bring disaster on everyone. Worse still, with Tang San held as his trump card, Tang Hao would never dare challenge the Wuhundian head-on. Even if by some miracle Tang Hao managed to save him, they'd likely disappear together. leaving this altered Douluo continent behind. Without the original storyline, Tang San might never achieve his destined glory, and all of their struggles would be for naught. Shi Feng's breath hitched. He was trapped, cornered by fate, and by the woman who wielded death like a blade. He had to make his decision now. Shi Feng's chest tightened with a cold certainty. He had no real choice but to obey Bibi Dong's summons. He knew that by pledging himself to her, he would one day stand opposed to Tang San. Yet even that bitter truth couldn't stop the dark thought that flickered through his mind. If it came to it, he could end Tang San himself. Bibi Dong watched him silently, her brow narrowing. "So," she said softly but sharply, "will you choose death, or will you follow me?" The question snapped Shi Feng back to the present. He shoved aside every chaotic emotion and knelt, head bowed low. "Teacher," he murmured, every syllable echoing with resolve. In that moment, Bibi Dong's icy facade seemed to blossom. A rare, almost tender smile curved her lips. Then it settled. "From today onward, you are mine." She reached out and took his hand. The skin was soft and warm, a startling sensation against the cold breeze of the courtyard. Shi Feng's heart leapt, even as he swallowed down his doubts. Behind them, Hulina followed in silence, her eyes alive with complicated curiosity. After all, she had never expected to gain yet another junior brother on this trip. Outside the hall, the gathered elders waited in respectful hush. Bibi Dong turned to face them, her voice carrying across the stone floor. "Elders, I present Shi Feng as my second disciple." A hush fell over the assembly. While it wasn't unusual for the sect leader to accept a new disciple, to claim a second after Cece and Su Yuntao already held that place was unprecedented. Still, none dared to challenge her decree. Shi Feng rose to his feet, hands still in Bibi Dong's, and braced himself for the path he had just bound himself to walk, one that would inevitably lead him into conflict with Tang San and change his world forever. When Bibi Dong's decree rang out, the assembled disciples nearly went wild. Becoming a disciple of the Pope had always been a distant dream, one they'd never dared to voice. Su Yuntao himself had only expected some modest reward for helping awaken a new martial spirit. Now, however, his young protege, Shi Feng, was officially accepted into the Pope's inner circle. The magnitude of his contribution was almost beyond belief. Bibi Dong regarded the overjoyed Su Yuntao with calm authority. "Deacon Su Yuntao, what reward do you request?" Su Yuntao swallowed hard against his excitement. "My lord, may I have a few minutes to consider?" "Of course." Su Yuntao's relief was evident. He exchanged a quick glance with his daughter, Cece, and the two conferred quietly at the edge of the assembly. A few minutes later, Su Yuntao stepped forward and bowed deeply before the Pope. "My lord, I wish to serve as master of the Notting City Branch Hall." A hush fell over the hall. Even the senior elders stared in mild astonishment. His request was so modest. Bibi Dong raised an eyebrow. "You could ask for far greater honors." Su Yuntao smiled, genuine and unpretentious. "No need, my lord. My talent is limited, and my innate soul power is only at the second level. The leadership of Notting City's branch hall is perfectly suited to my abilities." Shi Feng bowed his head in quiet acceptance. "I suppose I'm never destined to become a great soul master. Serving as Lord of Notting City is reward enough. I will devote myself to the Wuhun Temple here and continue to seek out gifted children." Pope Bibi Dong leaned back on his ornate throne, satisfaction bright in his eyes. "Excellent. The Spirit Hall needs loyal and talented men like you. By my decree, you are hereby appointed master of the Notting City branch." "Thank you, Your Holiness." Shi Feng inclined his head respectfully. "All right then, I'll take my leave and return to Wuhun City." Su Yuntao stepped forward, bowing to both Shi Feng and the Pope before turning to go. Pope Bibi Dong rose alongside Shi Feng and led him toward the grand doors of the temple hall. As they passed Su Yuntao, Shi Feng paused, placing a hand on his junior's shoulder. "Su Yuntao, I appreciate all you've done for me." Su Yuntao paused, surprised by the gesture, but smiled warmly. "Master Shi, it's been my honor to serve under you." With that, he bowed once more and departed. Shi Feng watched him go, determination settling in his gaze. As he stepped out into the morning light of Notting City, he tightened his cloak around his shoulders. The title of Lord was merely the beginning. Countless children with latent soul power were waiting for discovery, and he would not disappoint the Spirit Hall, nor himself. Su Yuntao bowed once more. It's the least I can do, sir. As soon as Shi Feng's carriage rolled out of sight, Cece flopped against Su Yuntao with a bright smile. Brother Tao, you're incredible. Inside the lush, velvet-lined coach, Bibi Dong turned to Shi Feng. We'll arrive in Wuhun City before long. Do you want to bid your family farewell first? Shi Feng paused to think. Actually, I have a friend from my village studying at Notting City Soulmaster Academy. I'll ask him to deliver a message to my grandfather. Let him know I've gone to Wuhundian to continue my training. Very well, Bibi Dong agreed. Nana, please accompany him. Hu Liana stepped forward, offering Shi Feng her arm. Together, they climbed into a smaller carriage bound for Notting City. Meanwhile, Bibi Dong and the others remained outside Wuhan City's gates, awaiting their return. Shi Feng sat awkwardly in the carriage as senior sister Hu Liana studied him with a teasing smile. You don't look very pleased to have our teacher, she said. He forced a grin, more like a grimace. No, not at all. I'm truly honored. I'll be in your care from now on, senior sister. Hu Liana's lips curved into a half-smile. Under her breath, she muttered, Care for whom, I wonder? She still felt uneasy about how Bibi Dong seemed to favor Shi Feng. When the carriage pulled up at Notting College, Shi Feng almost leapt out. I'm fine on my own now, senior sister. Hu Liana blocked his path with mock severity. Not a chance. What if you try to run off again? I'd never live down the teacher's anger. Shi Feng sighed and allowed her to lead him toward the gates. But at the edge of the dormitory area, she stopped and gave him a pointed look. Shi Feng nodded awkwardly and turned back to head for Qishe by himself. That evening, Tang San greeted him warmly. Congratulations, Shi Feng. Securing a place at Wuhundian is a huge accomplishment. Grandfather Jack would be proud. Shi Feng offered a simple smile and said nothing of Bibi Dong's decision to accept him as a disciple. He knew that if Tang San learned the full truth, he wouldn't be able to stay so calm. Xiaoxue stood quietly at his side, her eyes on Shi Feng swirling with conflicting emotions, even a hint of resentment. Once he'd stowed the last of his belongings, Shi Feng turned to Tang San. Sanner, he said solemnly, what would you do if one day we truly became life-and-death enemies? Tang San paused, surprised, then shook his head with a wry smile. That'll never happen. But let's say it does. Tang San considered the question for a moment, then nodded firmly. In that case, I'd spare you once. Shi Feng's lips curved into a small smile. Then I'll spare you once too. He walked to the door, stopped, and looked back. And don't forget to tell my grandfather, I promise I'll come back to visit him. Tang San waved him off. Don't worry. Enjoy your break. I'll let him know as soon as I get home. With that, Shi Feng departed. He hadn't challenged Tang San, but a warmth settled in his chest. He realized Tang San had become a true friend. If the day ever came when they stood on opposite sides, Shi Feng knew he would be just as generous with mercy. Chapter 49. Bibi Dong was stunned beyond the walls of Notting City. The luxurious caravan rolled slowly along the road, a solitary black bird circling high above. Shi Feng pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the carriage window, watching Notting City shrink in the distance. His thoughts churned restlessly. After everything he'd endured to get here, he couldn't deny a flicker of relief at the thought of joining the Wuhun Temple. With its unparalleled resources, he could advance faster than anywhere else. Still, he couldn't quiet his doubts. Each time he absorbed a new spirit ring, disaster seemed to strike. Catastrophes that felt like a punishment from heaven itself. What if he was truly marked by fate? Even if he was Tang San's enemy, would that protect him from divine retribution? Shi Feng closed his eyes and drew a steady before wreath. Worry wouldn't help him grow stronger. He needed to focus on the path ahead. A gentle tap on his shoulder broke his reverie. Opening his eyes, he saw Hu Liana, the young disciple beside him, watching him with concern. Brother Shi, she said softly, are you sad to leave home behind? He straightened up and shifted to face her. A little, he admitted. She smiled and reached over to ruffle his hair, a gesture meant to be comforting, but feeling oddly patronizing given her 11 or 12 years. Don't be down, she said cheerfully. From now on, I'll be your family here at the temple. Shi Feng gave her a small, wry smile. She meant well, but the childish head-patting made him feel strangely self-conscious. Still, he knew he couldn't push her away. Instead, he threw her a teasing grin. "All right, sis, but don't expect me to hand over my chores." Hulina laughed and flopped back into her seat. "Deal. You do all the fetching and carrying, and I'll protect you from the angry spirits." Her eyes danced with playful bravado. Shi Feng let out a laugh of his own. For the first time that journey, the tension in his chest eased. Whatever trials awaited him at the Wuhun Temple, he wouldn't face them alone. With allies by his side and a determination burning in his heart, he resolved to turn every catastrophe into strength and prove that even fate itself couldn't hold him back. Shi Feng hesitated, unable to step aside. After all, Hulina was his senior sister. He might still need her backing in the spirit hall. Bibi Dong, pleased by his deference, smiled and said, "Fenger, I heard that you awakened with full soul potential. Have you claimed your soul ring yet? If not, once we return to Spirit City, I'll arrange for some of our strongest masters to take you out on a beast hunt." Shi Feng swallowed and replied, "Teacher, I've already secured my first soul ring." Bibi Dong's eyes lit up. "With your talent, you should have absorbed a century-old ring, right?" She worried that a small place like Notting City might have shortchanged her prodigy. 10-year rings simply wouldn't do. Shi Feng shook his head. "It isn't a century-old ring." Instantly, the smile vanished from Bibi Dong's face, replaced by rare disappointment. Beside her, Hulina looked at Shi Feng with sympathetic pity. Bibi Dong reached out a hand. "Let me see your soul ring." Shi Feng's martial spirit is solid. Although his first spirit ring is slightly weaker than those of his peers, with dedicated training, he could still hold his own against other prodigies. And while it isn't unheard of to increase a soul ring's age, the conditions required to do so are extraordinarily harsh. Page 64. When Shi Feng hesitated, Bibi Dong stepped forward and offered reassurance. "Don't worry," she said gently. "Even though your first soul ring is only 10 years old, if you keep training diligently, I'll see what I can do to help you extend its age." Shi Feng blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected Bibi Dong to volunteer such help. With a wry smile, he decided to show her his soul ring. Normally, his zombie martial soul wouldn't display its ring until after a soul possession, and since he'd never used that technique inside the Wuhun Palace, nobody here had ever seen it. Of course, he could also release the ring without manifesting his martial soul. Gathering his focus, he summoned a violet-hued band from the ground beneath him. The ring floated upward, spinning slowly in midair. A stunned silence swept through the assembled experts of the Wuhun Palace. Even Hulina, usually the epitome of poise, stared in disbelief, her hand flying to cover her parted lips. 1,000-year soul ring for a first-stage practitioner. How could such a thing be possible? Bibi Dong knew the usual rules. A soul master with twin martial souls only unlocks the second soul after reaching a certain level of strength, and each new spirit ring normally required a 10-year minimum, or an extraordinary external trial. But she'd never heard of anyone at Spirit Master level 10 absorbing a 1,000-year spirit ring. It simply wasn't possible, unless, of course, the bearer wasn't entirely human. "Teacher," Shi Feng said calmly, "my spirit ring isn't 10 years old. It's 1,000 years old." At his words, Pope Dong, whose authority and majesty had always silenced the entire hall, sat frozen, her composure slipping for the very first time before an audience. Shi Feng felt the urge to smile, but he forced himself to stay serious. He knew better than risk offending this formidable woman. Quickly, Bibi Dong blinked away her shock. She squared her shoulders and adopted her usual stern expression, outwardly restoring the dignified presence expected of a sect leader, even though her heart still pounded wildly at the revelation. "Shi Feng, explain to us exactly how you managed to absorb that spirit ring." Before the ring even appeared, Shi Feng had already rehearsed his answer in his mind. He met their gazes without hesitation. "Teacher, I was born with an exceptionally strong physique. Even before I absorbed the ring, my raw strength reached 1,000 caddies. It was excruciating, but I still succeeded in drawing in the spirit ring." Teacher Bibi Dong's brow tightened, and her tone grew sharp. "You recklessly absorbed a 1,000-year spirit ring? Didn't any of the Academy's instructors try to stop you? If you're not ready, you could die from the backlash." Despite her admonishment, Shi Feng felt a warm swell of affection for how fiercely she cared about his safety. He cleared his throat. I was separated from my master at the time. I happened upon a soul beast that was on its last legs, and without checking its age, I absorbed its ring on impulse. A rosy flush crept over his cheeks. He knew it was a flimsy excuse, but teacher Bibi Dong and teacher Hu Liana exchanged a quick, relieved glance and accepted his story. After all, what better explanation could there be? Bibi Dong stepped forward and guided Shi Feng to stand before her, her eyes studying him with growing satisfaction. He really was a treasure, she'd discovered. From birth he'd possessed abundant spirit power and a physique far superior to his peers. And at only 6 years old, he had already absorbed a 1,000-year spirit ring. Such talent even outstripped her own twin martial spirits in certain respects. With a graceful wave of her hand, she produced an exquisitely crafted ring inset with golden filigree. "This is a gift from your master," she announced. Shi Feng examined it in wonder. Could it be the same kind of spirit tool as Tang San's famed 24-bridge Moonlight Night? Indeed, Bibi Dong confirmed with a gentle smile. It's a high-grade spirit tool with a spatial chamber of several cubic meters. You need only connect with it through your thoughts and spirit power to summon or store items. Unable to contain his excitement, Shi Feng slipped the ring onto his right index finger. After a few tests, he mastered its use and tucked several of his clothes into its pocket dimension. "Thank you, teacher," he said sincerely. Bibi Dong's lips curved in rare approval as she reached out to ruffle his hair. "Your gratitude will be repaid by your future progress," she murmured. "Cultivate diligently, Shi Feng, and you'll be the greatest reward of all." Chapter 50. Arrival at Wuhan City. Hu Lina watched enviously as Bibi Dong slipped a beautifully crafted ring onto Shi Feng's finger. The gem in its setting sparkled like a drop of moonlight, and she longed for something just as exquisite. Noticing her wistful expression, Bibi Dong smiled and produced a necklace from the folds of his robe. "Nana, this is for you," he said, draping the crystal pendant around her neck. "Its power is identical to Shi Feng's ring." Hu Lina's eyes lit up. The clear crystal caught the light and refracted it into 1,000 rainbows. She reached out and clasped the chain around her throat. "Thank you, master," she exclaimed, practically bouncing with delight. Bibi Dong regarded his two disciples fondly. "You're both under my care now. Remember, you must look out for one another." The pair bowed in unison. "Yes, master." He nodded and glanced at Shi Feng. "Shi Feng will arrive at Wuhan Palace shortly. Nana, be sure to guide him around. Show him the layout and introduce him to the others. That way, no one can take advantage of him." "Don't worry, master," Hu Lina replied confidently. "I'll take good care of him." Shi Feng hesitated, cheeks tinged with pink. He was grateful for the gifts and for Hu Lina's willingness to help, but he wasn't exactly a child. "Master," he ventured, "would it be possible for me to have my own quarters instead?" Bibi Dong studied him for a moment, then waved his hand. "Very well. If you'd prefer privacy, you shall have it. I only ask that you check in with each other from time to time." "Thank you, master," Shi Feng said, relief flooding his chest. With the arrangements settled, the trio set off for Wuhan City's imposing gates, unaware that this new chapter of their journey would test both loyalty and strength in ways they could never have imagined. Bibi Dong's eyes sparkled as she offered a warm smile. "You're still so young, Shi Feng. Why don't you stay with Sister Nana for now? She'll look after you." Shi Feng's face tightened with uncertainty. But before he could finish, Hu Liana's soft laughter filled the air. She stepped forward, gently drawing him into a comforting embrace. "What are you worried about?" she teased, her voice light. "Afraid your senior sister might gobble you up?" Her playful grin only made Shi Feng blush deeper. Mortified, he squirmed out of her arms and took a hasty step back. I'm not," he stammered, cheeks flaming as he tried to regain his composure. Hu Lina simply chuckled, her eyes warm with affection, while Bibi Dong watched approvingly. It seemed that, for now, everything would fall into place under the care of Sister Nana. He grumbled inwardly, "I really fear you Vixens might devour me." But no matter how much he protested, Bibi Dong and Hu Lina only tightened their grip on his arms, and Shi Feng could feel his irritation growing by the minute. 2 days later, the convoy rolled into Notting City. The journey back to Wuhan City proved even slower. It took 3 more days before they finally arrived. In terms of sheer area, Wuhan can't rival the great imperial capitals, but its architecture is nothing short of awe-inspiring. The city wall alone soars over 80 meters in height and stretches 30 meters across, hewn entirely from impervious granite. It's the sort of construction that leaves onlookers breathless. Passing under one of the massive gateways, Hu Liena began her tour of introductions. Wuhan City was laid out as a perfect hexagon, she explained. 6 gates, one on each side, constantly watched over by patrolling soulmasters. Inside, the streets are incredibly wide, though you'll rarely encounter many pedestrians. Even the few shops you see stock only those rarefied goods that soulmasters require. Leaning forward in his carriage, Shi Feng slipped his head beneath the curtain and peered out the window. From this vantage, he noticed that the entire city seemed to fan outward from a central hill. Buildings of polished stone and tiled roofs climbed its slopes in neat tiers, as though the settlement had grown naturally around the mound's rocky summit. It was a sight both strange and utterly captivating. Shi Feng climbed the gently sloping path and paused to take in the 2 imposing buildings before him. The larger, more ornate structure, nestled halfway up the hill, was the Pope's palace, the residence of the Pope himself and the home of his disciples. Thanks to Hu Liena's earlier explanation, he now knew that she and he would live within those gilded walls alongside the pontiff. Crowning the hilltop, gleaming as white as polished jade, stood the Douluo Hall. Its purity of stone and lofty spires marked it as a sacred mausoleum, the final resting place of a titled Douluo. Not even the Pope was permitted to enter its halls. At most he could bow in solemn reverence at its threshold. Around them on the cobbled square, soulmasters went about their business with hushed respect, many casting glances toward the Douluo Hall as though it were the beating heart of their faith. Shi Feng felt the weight of their devotion settle upon him, a reminder of the power and mystery that this place embodied. Hu Liena guided him onward, her voice low but animated. Inside the Pope's palace, there's another wing, the Hall of Elders. That's where the senior titled Douluo reside. They're fiercely talented, but some of them, let's just say they have unusual tempers. We must be mindful of our manners and follow every rule while we're within their domain. Shi Feng nodded, curiosity and a touch of apprehension stirring in his chest. Ahead lay 3 years of rigorous training, and his first glimpse of life at the very summit of the Soulmaster world. Don't wander off in there, Bibi Dong warned as the car rolled to a stop at the foot of the mountain. Shi Feng nodded. Understood. But inside, his mind was racing. The great elder must be Qian Daoliu. Would he be waiting in the Hall of Elders? And what about Qian Renshui? Did he still occupy the Hall of Spirits? If so, he would likely reside in the same building. Hu Liena slid out of the passenger seat. Bibi Dong turned to her. Pick up whatever daily necessities Shi Feng needs. He's running out of decent clothes. Shi Feng glanced down at his own outfit. A faded, nodding college uniform, riddled with holes where Tang San's blue-silver grass had torn through the fabric. Even the garments tucked away in his ring space were threadbare and patched in a dozen places. They were gifts from old Jack, and though Shi Feng hated to discard them, each stitch reminded him of home. He knew he couldn't wander through the sect like a ragged pauper any longer. Minutes later, they arrived at a modest clothing shop in the Valley, Y-Town. Shi Feng stepped into the changing room and carefully tried on the new attire Hu Liena had selected. When he finally emerged, the difference was striking. The simple tunic and trousers fit him perfectly, clean lines, sturdy threads, no loose seams. His youthful face, framed by neatly trimmed hair, carried a quiet confidence that made him stand out even in this unfamiliar place. Hu Liena gave him an approving nod. Much better. This will do nicely. Shi Feng offered a small, grateful smile. For the first time since arriving in this sect, he felt ready to face whatever awaited him in the halls of the elders and spirits. Shi Feng had been wearing shabby clothes before, but now, clad in an exquisite robe, he looked transformed. Hu Liena's eyes lit up. Not bad, not bad, she exclaimed, nodding enthusiastically. Without a second thought, she bought him more than a dozen new outfits on the spot. Freshly loaded with shopping bags, Hu Liena then steered Shi Feng straight into a nearby salon. He felt like a puppet on strings, completely at her mercy. 2 hours later, she finally stepped back. a satisfied smile playing on her lips as she admired her handiwork. Shi Feng offered a wry grin. Having a perfectionist senior sister like Juliana was going to be a challenge. From head to toe, he was unrecognizable. His jet-black hair had been expertly styled, his eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, his features were now sharp and defined, and he wore only the finest fabrics. In just 2 hours, he'd become a completely different person. Juliana beamed and gave his arm an approving squeeze. From now on, this is your look, understood? Shi Feng could only nod helplessly. At least she hadn't tried turning him into a woman. That would have been a real disaster. Let's go. Juliana looped her arm through Shi Feng's and began leading him up the mountain. From halfway up the slope, a stairway of 30-meter-wide stone steps ascended to the Pope's palace like a ladder to the sky. Armed guards lined each tier, their auras crackling with power, a palpable reminder of the palace's might. Yet the moment they saw Juliana, every sentinel stood aside without a word. Neither Juliana nor Shi Feng felt the climb's strain. As soul masters, they moved as if walking on air. When they reached a broad landing, Shi Feng glanced back down the endless staircase. "Senior sister," he asked, "does our spirit hall have its own academy?" Juliana's face brightened. "Yes, the Wuhundian Academy is the foremost institution on the continent. Every champion in the World Soul Master Tournament has graduated from there. Soon you and I will enroll and hone our skills under the best masters." Shi Feng's eyes narrowed. "And me? How will Master assign my training?" Juliana paused to consider. "You'll remain here with the Master for now. You don't yet meet the entry requirements for Wuhundian Academy." Shi Feng's curiosity flared. "What requirements am I missing?" He fell into step beside her, eager to learn what challenges lay ahead. Shi Feng raised an eyebrow as he studied the inscription carved into the marble wall. "So this fabled Wuhundian Academy really is as formidable as they say. Students must reach at least level before their 13th birthday." Juliana nodded with a confident smile. "Exactly. As the premier martial academy in the realm, Wuhundian only admits the brightest young talents each year. Even our senior sister and I wouldn't dream of calling ourselves its top prodigies." She reached out and patted Shi Feng's shoulder encouragingly. "But don't worry, you've got what it takes. Train under Master's guidance for the next few years, and you'll have no problem meeting their requirements." With that, the two of them pressed on. 10 minutes later, they ascended a final broad staircase and stepped into the vast, awe-inspiring Pope's palace, its gilded pillars and soaring arches glowing in the afternoon light. Chapter 51. Qian Renshui Shi stepped into the sprawling Pope's palace, taking in its many wings: the grand conference hall, the Pope's private chambers, the hidden elders' hall deep below, and numerous training grounds scattered throughout the complex. He glanced at Juliana and asked warily, "Senior sister, where will we be living?" "You haven't mentioned our quarters yet." Juliana smiled. "We're our master's disciples, aren't we? Naturally, we'll stay in the Pope's own bedroom." Moments later, Shi Feng stood speechless before a lavish room awash in soft pink. The king-sized bed was draped in rosy linens, a matching sofa sat by the window, and heavy curtains framed the doorway. Everywhere he looked, delicate pink roses filled vases, suffusing the air with a sweet, lingering fragrance, eerily reminiscent of Juliana herself. "My, senior sister," he stammered, face flushing. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" With a graceful sweep of her hand, Juliana indicated the oversized pink canopy bed. "You take the bed. I'll sleep on the floor." Shi Feng's eyes went wide. He tightened the collar of his tunic. "But I'm a man." He fought to steady his racing heart as he realized just how awkward this arrangement might be. Shi Feng fidgeted as Juliana glanced at him, then, almost in a whisper, leaned in until her warm breath brushed his cheek. "You're so young," she teased. "Are you afraid this senior sister of yours might eat you up?" His face flamed crimson. He spun away, cursing the playful Vixen under his breath. Then he remembered. He no longer had to return to the dorms each night. He could find a quiet corner to practice, snatch a few hours' sleep by day, and use all the darkness for cultivation. Relief flooded him. Juliana giggled and winked. "You really are amusing, junior brother." She studied him as though he were a new toy, a look that sent an uneasy shiver down his spine. He just knew she'd find a dozen ways to tease him in the days to come. With that, she shrugged off her coat. I haven't cleaned up in days. I'm going in for a shower, so don't you dare peek, brat. Me? Peek? As if! Shi Feng called after her, rolling his eyes. Hu Liana's humming echoed from behind the bathroom door. Shi Feng stood in the corridor, hands in his pockets, glancing down the empty hallway. A sudden idea struck him. Why not slip out tonight and explore the Pope's palace under cover of darkness? With nothing else to occupy him, the plan felt irresistibly tempting. Shi Feng wandered through the Pope's palace, where countless miniature pavilions, graceful bridges, and winding streams blurred together. No matter which way he turned, the buildings only seemed to multiply, and the path he thought he'd taken grew ever more distant. Before long, he realized he was hopelessly lost. A cold bead of sweat rolled down his temple as he recalled Hu Liana's warning. Somewhere deep inside the court lay the Elder Hall, home to a notoriously eccentric senior. If the rumors of that elder's madness were true, Shi Feng knew he wouldn't stand a chance if he ran into him. Panicking, he focused his spirit and summoned the little black sparrow from the depths of his heart channel. The bird had been perching just outside the city gate, watching for him. At his mental summons, it swooped back toward the palace, its dark wings a flicker in the air. Shi Feng intended simply to remain hidden until his feathered companion returned, then slip away before anyone noticed him. Suddenly, sharp voices rang out, shouts of exertion and clipped commands. Shi Feng froze. The Pope's palace held numerous training grounds, so the sounds might have come from any number of trainees. Still, when a young woman's high-pitched cry pierced the air, rough around the edges, clearly unpolished, something stirred in him. Against his better judgment, curiosity pulled him toward the voices. He crept forward, hoping to catch a glimpse of the speaker before resuming his escape. It's a serious taboo to spy on someone else's cultivation, but the moment the thought crossed Shi Feng's mind, he couldn't stop himself. The rhythmic hum of soul energy was unmistakable. That had to be the very woman he admired most. Before he knew it, his feet were carrying him down the corridor. Through an arched doorway, he came upon a secluded training arena and quietly slipped to the edge of the entrance. Inside stood a girl, roughly the same age as Hu Liana. Her short, blonde hair framed a face so exquisitely fair it put Hu Liana's delicate beauty to shame, though her figure was still slender and undeveloped in comparison. She wore a snug, golden training suit that gleamed in the morning light. What really stunned Shi Feng, however, were the 3 spirit rings orbiting her spirit imprint. 2 pale yellow rings, each a full century old, and 1 deep purple ring that marked 1,000 years. Shi Feng knew Hu Liana was only 11 and hadn't even broken through to the soul transformation stage yet. Yet here stood this girl, so young and already wielding 3 ancient spirit rings, clear proof she had soared well into the mid-levels of soul transformation. Such prodigious talent was almost unheard of. Shi Feng's breath caught in his throat. Across the arena stood a girl whose back was rent, her clothes in shreds, revealing a pair of luminous white wings. Behind her hovered a colossal, indistinct phantom, 6 wings fanning out in 3 tiers, its visage too blurred to discern. It really is her, Seraph Spirit Soul Xiaoxue! Shi Feng's pulse thundered in his ears. Who? The girl whipped her head around. When her flaming gaze fell on the lone youth perched at the arena's edge, fury blazed in her eyes. In an instant, her wings beat the air and her body lunged toward him. A golden light pulsed at her first soul ring, gathering at her right fist until it glowed like molten sunlight. That radiant aura crackled with divine power, poised to purify or obliterate anything in its path. Shi Feng's heart hammered. Facing Xiaoxue in this state was sheer madness. Her strength dwarfed his. No antidote or toxin coursing through him could touch her. Without a second thought, he spun on his heel and sprinted, every muscle straining to put distance between them before that consecrated blow could land. The arena erupted in dust and thunder as Xiaoxue's golden fist cleaved through the space he just occupied. Shi Feng didn't dare glance back until the roar of wind and power had faded into the distance, and even then, he kept moving. Today, survival was victory enough. Shi Feng hurtled toward the archway, every muscle coiled for one last burst of speed. In that instant, Xiaoxue's sapphire eyes ignited with golden flame. Her second soul ring flared to life, and alongside her pristine white wings, a pair of translucent, illusory wings materialized. She blurred forward, her velocity spiking beyond anything Shi Feng had anticipated. Behind him, the surge of power grew unbearable, and the arch still loomed several meters away. Shi Feng's heart pounded. There was no way he could break through. Gritting his teeth, he leapt sideways, vanishing from her direct line of attack in a heartbeat. Qian Renshui's fist, still crackling with energy, swung through empty air. For a fleeting second, she froze, her expression tinged with surprise. She had no desire to harm him so recklessly and was already easing her strike, until she realized Shi Feng was now slipping off to the right, still fleeing. She halted completely. The luminescence around her fist winked out. Wings folding back against her robes, she turned her gaze to Shi Feng, who crouched not far off, chest heaving. A cold stillness settled over her features. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice as sharp and unyielding as tempered steel. Shi Feng's confident stride came to an abrupt halt under Qian Renshui's cold, assessing stare. At first, she'd assumed he was just another lost child and meant only to scare him off. She hadn't expected there was something different about him. Shi Feng, oblivious to her intent, felt a flicker of awkwardness at the frost in her eyes. He forced a pout and lifted his voice, sounding as pitiful as possible. "Sister, where are we? I wandered off and can't find the way back. Could you help me?" His performance was uncanny. Those big, innocent eyes and a trembling lower lip, enough to tug at any passerby's heartstrings. Yet in his eagerness to play the role of the helpless child, Shi Feng had made a crucial mistake. Only moments before, he'd slipped past Qian Renshui's pursuit with calm precision. Now he was feigning vulnerability. Anyone else might fall for it, but not this razor-sharp young woman. Every flicker of his expression was under her microscope. Without warning, golden light blazed to life around Qian Shui's clenched fist, flickering like living embers. The sheer intensity of that aura sent a chill through Shi Feng's bones and caused his heart to race. Chapter 52. Turned into a pig's head again. "As far as I know, there shouldn't be anyone your age inside the Pope's palace. Who are you? How did you get in? Speak, unless you want to die." Qian Renshui's voice echoed off the marble walls, her body wreathed in golden light as she advanced on Shi Feng. He paled, instinctively taking a step back. Heart-pounding, he forced out, "I'm the Pope's new disciple." Her charging motion stuttered for a heartbeat, then she sneered. "So you claim to be her disciple? That makes no difference. I'm not going to show you any mercy." With that, Qian Renshui lurched forward at impossible speed, her fist glowing like a miniature sun. Shi Feng's stomach twisted. He'd heard rumors that Qian Renshui and Bibi Dong never got along, but he'd never imagined she'd be this ruthless, especially toward someone under the Pope's wing. "Mother, what's happening?" he murmured to himself, adrenaline surging as he turned to flee down the corridor. The golden light on Qian Renshui's fist reminded him too much of the time he'd faced Tianlei. Powerful, unforgiving, singular in its destructive force. Could he really withstand that? He zigzagged through a pair of towering columns, hoping to draw some distance. But Qian Renshui simply followed, her speed undiminished. Each footfall thudded like a drumbeat in Shi Feng's ears, and each step she took radiated more brilliance, more intent to strike him down. Cornered at the end of the hall, Shi Feng skidded to a halt, his back pressed against the cold stone. He looked up at Qian Renshui's fierce eyes, noticing now how the golden aura around her had so thoroughly enveloped her that even her hair seemed to shimmer. "You, why are you attacking me?" he called out, voice cracking. "I'm a disciple of the Pope, just like you." Her lips curled in contemptuous amusement. "Are you truly, or are you lying to save your skin?" She raised her fist, and the air between them crackled with energy. Shi Feng swallowed. He'd trained for moments like this, but never against someone so merciless, and someone who already viewed him as an intruder. Gritting his teeth, he braced himself for the blow that would turn him, once again, into nothing more than a pig's head beneath her golden fist. The searing heat behind him grew unbearably close, making Shi Feng's scalp tingle and his limbs burn with pain, as though he were trapped in a wall of flame. He clenched his teeth. "Time to switch it up," he shouted, pivoting on his heel and flashing past Qian Renshui's outstretched fist. For a moment, Qian Renshui froze in surprise. This child had dodged her strike again. In truth, her blow hadn't carried much force. The brilliant golden aura she'd summoned was all bluff. Yet it had been enough to unnerve Shi Feng. Now, though, her eyes flared with even more intense light, so dazzling that he had to squint against it. Shi Feng rolled twice, then unsaid toward the archway once more, only to find Qianrenshui already blocking his path. She moved with uncanny swiftness, her mastery of aerial maneuvers growing more apparent by the second. Boom! Before he could react, Qianrenshui's fist slammed into his shoulder. Pain shot through Shi Feng's arm and torso, and he lurched backward, clutching his side. His momentum carried him across the courtyard in a harsh tumble, dirt and pebbles biting into his clothes as he skidded to a stop. Gasping for breath, Shi Feng forced himself to rise, determination burning in his eyes. If he wanted to pass this trial, he'd need to push even harder. He snorted as Qianrenshui's soul skill took hold, its corrosive energy seeping into him and rapidly eating away at his soul power. Agonizing pain surged through him, but to her surprise, he staggered back to his feet and darted for the exit. This kid's cheating, Qianrenshui thought, her temper flaring. She leapt into the air, wings beating faster than before, and summoned even more golden energy to her fist. Her last attack hadn't fazed Shi Feng, so she pushed harder, determined not only to teach him a lesson, but to vent the anger she still harbored toward Bibi Dong. Shi Feng didn't know any of that. He only knew that Qianrenshui was closing in at terrifying speed, her energy crackling with ruthless force. His soul power had nearly been stripped away by her previous blow. Another strike like that would leave him defenseless. He skidded to a halt, wheeling around to face her. "I don't care about you. Why are you chasing me?" he demanded, his voice ringing out in the silent hall. Shi Feng's protests were cut short by the sharp crack of Qianrenshui's fists. She struck him again and again, each blow more ruthless than the last, her gloved knuckles finding his face with relentless precision. Shi Feng's spiritual energy flickered under the onslaught, and pain bloomed across his cheeks. Fury flared in his chest. How dare she treat him this way? He breathed in, refusing to dodge for once. Gathering what remained of his soul power, he pivoted and slammed his fist toward Qianrenshui. Lightning danced along his knuckles as he unleashed his signature move. Lightning fist! Startled, Qianrenshui braced herself and instinctively countered, but the clash still reverberated like a thunderclap. In an instant, both combatants were sent flying backward, skidding across the ground before tumbling to a halt. Qianrenshui scrambled upright, her eyes wide with surprise. She had held back, yet Shi Feng's counterstrike had been devastating. Never before had she seen such raw strength in a soul master so young. A reluctant admiration warmed her chest. As one would expect of my disciple, she thought, a small smile tugging at her lips. But the more it happened, the more determined she became to teach Shi Feng a lesson. Shi Feng had long since grown weary of Bibi Dong's icy disdain, and today he paid the price for her pupil's frigid treatment. Since childhood, Qianrenshui had desperately craved the master's affection, only to be met, time and again, with nothing but repulsion. Now frustration had curdled into rage. She needed to strike out, to prove her strength, to see if Bibi Dong felt anything beyond contempt. Would the master finally react if her cherished disciple was hurt? Shi Feng, oblivious to Qianrenshui's deeper motives, found himself in the path of her fury. After landing the opening punch, she launched into a relentless assault. He staggered back and then bolted, tearing across the vast expanse of the martial arena in a bid to escape. But Qianrenshui was already moving to seal off his retreat. She took her place at the gate, her form a dark silhouette against the towering stone barrier, its walls easily 30 feet high. Shi Feng skidded to a halt, cornered with no clear exit. Gritting his teeth, he summoned his martial spirit, preparing to unleash a skillful burst of speed and slip past her guard. Before he could react, Qianrenshui struck again, her fist a blur of precise, punishing blows. Shi Feng's legs hummed as his velocity spiked, but it wasn't enough. He tried to veer aside, and in an instant, his shoulder rammed into the unyielding wall. Stars exploded behind his eyelids as pain lanced through him. Qianrenshui stood, unmoving, her eyes cold and triumphant. Shi Feng crumpled to the ground, the echo of impact ringing in his skull, and deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of her onslaught. I had no idea what kind of stone this wall was made of, but it felt harder than iron, hard enough to give Shi Feng a nasty concussion. He staggered forward at full speed and slammed headlong into the wall, then crumpled to the ground, clutching his forehead. Qianrenshi came to an abrupt halt and stared, astonished. Shi Feng lay there, dazed and in pain, his eyes wide with confusion. How on earth had his speed spiked like that all of a sudden? And why did he charge right into the wall? Was he so desperate to escape that he tried to smash his way through, when even she herself couldn't break this barrier? Shi Feng blinked up at her, still rubbing his throbbing head. That was stupid, he muttered, limping to his feet. Well, enough of this chase. Are you done now? Because if I could have actually fought back, I'd have pinned you and... He trailed off, glaring ruefully at the impenetrable stone before them. There was no denying it. She'd won. Shi Feng's head throbbed with every heartbeat as he stood before Qianrenshi, his face so swollen it felt like it might split open. She surveyed him coolly, then, unexpectedly, let out a tinkling laugh. The sound was like a sudden bloom in winter, beautiful but cruelly out of place. In a kinder time, Shi Feng might have found her smile enchanting. Now it felt like salt in an open wound. Qianrenshi's expression froze back into icy calm. Go tell your teacher, she said, voice sharp as frost, that if she wants her revenge, she'll have to come see me herself. Shi Feng clenched his fists, fighting back tears of pain and humiliation. He turned away wordlessly and set off, still dizzy from the blows. Perched on his shoulder, the little black sparrow chirped insistently, pointing him in the right direction. With its guidance, he stumbled toward the Pope's quarters. Every step felt like a reminder of how pitifully unprepared he'd been. His porky snout, as he mentally cursed, was even more grotesque than the time Tang San had taught him a lesson, and this time his soul power trickled half-heartedly to his wounds, barely enough to dull the agony. He paused just outside the palace gates, unwilling to face anyone in this state. What did Bibi Dong's feud have to do with me? He muttered, anger and helplessness warring inside him. He pressed his hand to his face. Every movement throbbed and shivered. To return to the Pope looking like this, it was unthinkable. Yet he had no choice. Gathering his key, Shi Feng forced himself to step forward, each footfall echoing his vow. He would clear his name and demand justice, no matter how long it took. Chapter 53, Bibi Dong's Attitude. Junior brother, where are you? Hu Lina called as she stepped out of the bedroom, and froze when she spotted Shi Feng huddled a few feet away, trying to disappear into the shadows. She rushed to his side. Shi Feng's face was bruised and swollen beyond recognition. Your junior brother? She stammered, hardly daring to believe her eyes. He barely resembled the lively boy she knew, but the academy uniform left no doubt. Heat of anger flared in her chest. Bibi Dong had specifically warned her to protect Shi Feng from harm, yet here he was, battered before he'd even finished his first day at the Spirit Hall. Tell me who did this to you, Hu Lina demanded, voice trembling. Don't worry, I'll make them pay. Senior sister will see you get justice. Shi Feng parted his lips, but only a harsh whisper emerged. Master. Senior sister, I swear I was stung by a wasp, Shi Feng admitted sheepishly. Qianrenshi had just sent him back to help carry their teacher, so how could he explain this battered, swollen face? Wandering off and ending up black and blue was simply bad luck. Really? Hu Lina arched an eyebrow at him. Really, he repeated, nodding. It wasn't just one wasp, it was a hornet, a whole swarm of them. They chased me down. Hu Lina studied his puffy cheeks and bruised jaw. She wasn't convinced, but she didn't hesitate either. All right, let me help you. She placed her warm palms on Shi Feng's face and began to channel her soul energy, hoping to mend the injuries. But to her surprise, a tenacious alien power writhed beneath his skin. Even her condensed aura couldn't purge it quickly. This venom isn't ordinary, Hu Lina murmured, frowning. It must be from a soul beast. She helped him to his feet. Come on, we should see Teacher Bibi. She'll know what to do. Shi Feng forced a wry smile. Of course Bibi Dong would see right through his story and instantly recognize who'd really handed him those bruises. Still, he followed Hu Lina down the corridor toward Bibi Dong's study, bracing himself for the inevitable teasing and perhaps a curative solution. Bibi Dong stepped out of the bathing chamber, her long golden hair still damp and tumbling freely down her back. She had shed the stately papal robes for loose, lightweight loungewear that softly draped over her graceful curves, giving her an air of relaxed authority. Hulina stood just inside the doorway, clearly envious. Her own figure was striking, but next to Bibi Dong's effortless poise, it felt ordinary. "Teacher," Hulina called softly. Bibi Dong looked up from the pile of memorials she'd been meticulously reviewing. The parchments, stacked neatly before her, bore witness to days spent poring over every detail. As her warm gaze settled on Hulina, she also took in Shi Feng, standing respectfully at Hulina's side. With a small, encouraging smile, she motioned them forward. Bibi Dong's violet robes fluttered as she hurried from her chamber. Outside the Elder's Hall, she stopped in alarm to see Shi Feng crumpled on the stone floor, one hand pressed to his side. Kneeling beside him, she gently brushed his dark hair back. "Fenger, what happened to you?" At her elbow, Hulina bit her lip, guilt written across her face. "Master, junior brother says he was stung by a wasp," she blurted. She'd been responsible for his safety, and if Bibi Dong held her at fault, she would accept any reprimand without complaint. Shi Feng's breath came in shallow gasps. He dared not meet Bibi Dong's concerned gaze. He was all too aware she must recognize him now. Softly, she asked, "You came all the way here?" He nodded. Once he'd caught his breath, he recounted every detail. The scouting mission, the hornet's nest, and, most humiliating of all, Qian Renshui's disdainful words. "She said I was nothing but an inferior brute, and that you, senior sister, would avenge me." Hulina's eyes flashed with anger. She reached to grab Shi Feng's arm, ready to march off and settle the score herself. "You've made her pay for this. Let me go." But Shi Feng placed a firm hand on her wrist. "Senior sister, please. Qian Renshui isn't just any cultivator. She's already a soul master. If we rush her now, she'll crush us both." Hulina's jaw tightened, but her spirit only hardened. "So what if she's a soul master? Are we to stand by and let her insult the Yun family's honor? And if she's as powerful as a soul venerable," her gaze turned fierce, "then I'll prove that the next generation of Yun disciples isn't to be trifled with. You can't just lash out at people, Hunzun, and we're not easy marks." "All right, Nana, this isn't your concern. Please calm down," Bibi Dong replied. "I'll help Feng recover." Shi Feng watched her closely, puzzled by her calm, almost detached expression. Bibi Dong placed her palm over his injuries and channeled her spirit power into his skin, easily dispelling the lingering soul force that Qian Renshui had left behind. With her Douluo-level cultivation, it was a straightforward task. After a moment, she withdrew her hand and produced a small vial of ointment. Gently, she applied it to Shi Feng's wounds. The miraculous salve penetrated his flesh, banishing the pain and reducing more than half of the swelling in an instant. A cool relief washed over him. "Rest now," Bibi Dong said as she finished. "You'll be fully healed by tomorrow." "Thank you, teacher," Shi Feng said, bowing his head in gratitude. Without her help, his recovery would have taken much longer. "Teacher," Hulina interjected, her voice tinged with urgency, "you must make the final decision about our junior brother." Bibi Dong shot Hulina a challenging look. "Do you seriously want me, a titled Douluo, to go easy on a soul venerable?" Hulina opened her mouth, but found herself at a loss for words. After a moment's hesitation, she squared her shoulders and turned to Shi Feng. "Junior brother Feng, take me with you tomorrow. I'll help you get justice." Shi Feng's heart warmed at her offer, but he shook his head gently. "Senior sister, there's really no need. I only ended up with some superficial bruises. She didn't hit me that hard." "Nana," Bibi Dong chided firmly. "That's enough. Don't rush in unprepared, do you hear me?" "All right, senior sister Bibi Dong," Hulina conceded with a nod. Bibi Dong then turned back to Shi Feng. "And you, Fenger, losing to an 11-year-old who's already reached the 38th cultivation level is nothing to be ashamed of. Rest up and train. We leave tomorrow." Shi Feng's eyes widened. He had known Qian Renshui was extraordinarily gifted, but 11 years old and already on the brink of soul sect power? It was almost beyond belief. Beside him, Hulina's shocked expression revealed how deeply she felt the gap between herself and that peerless prodigy. Bibi Dong's expression grew serious. "Your spirit is attack-aligned. As an attack-type soul master, you need to learn what it feels like to be of, or powered. Starting today, you'll go there every morning and let them beat you. When you return, I'll heal your injuries." Shi Feng blinked in disbelief. Get beaten every day? Is that even a training method? I'm fine with taking hits, but senior sister Chan Renshui, she's already level 38, over 20 levels above me. I'll just end up a punching bag. He looked at Bibi Dong. Teacher, can't I spar with senior sister Hulina instead? Huliana jumped at the chance. Yes, teacher. I want to show Chan Renshui what happens when she mistreats my junior brother. Bibi Dong shook her head. No, Nana. You're a control-type soul master. You're not the right match for Shi Feng. Chan Renshui is the only one who can push him to his limits. She fixed Shi Feng with a stern gaze. Do you understand what I'm asking? Shi Feng took a deep breath and nodded. If he truly wanted to grow stronger, he first had to learn how to be defeated. A harsh lesson, but a necessary one. Chapter 54, The Death Camp. Shi Feng, you head back, Bibi Dong said softly. Once the boy slipped away, she turned to Huliana. Liana, you'll be leaving for Wuhundian Academy in just a few days. I have a new assignment for you. Over the next few days, teach Shi Feng everything he needs to know about surviving a death camp. Huliana went pale. Her voice trembled as she managed. Teacher, where exactly are you sending him? Bibi Dong's expression remained calm, almost stern. Disciples of mine are destined for greatness, both in strength and in character. Your own talent is remarkable, but if you can't guide him through the death camp's trial, I will not accept him as my disciple. At the mention of the death camp, Lena's heart pounded. She had escaped its horrors only years before, yet the nightmares still haunted her. But he's only 6 years old. I was 8 when I first entered, and my brother, my elder brother, looked after me the whole time. Surely someone so young can't last 3 days in that place? Bibi Dong's tone was resolute. Exactly. His survival hinges on your teaching. Whether he lives or dies rests entirely on you. Over the next few days, you can share some of your own experiences with him, help him steel his mind before he goes in. Huliana bit her lip. She knew she couldn't change Lady Bibi Dong's decision, so she reluctantly nodded in agreement. Only after Huliana had left did Bibi Dong sink into her chair, a storm of emotions flickering across her face. That place was the finest crucible for forging strength, and as Lady Bibi's disciple, Shi Feng had no choice but to enter. Without the resolve of a true warrior, how could he ever become powerful? After all, Huliana herself had spent 3 brutal years there, emerging only by treading over the corpses of those who failed. Shi Feng wore a dark expression. Bibi Dong's orders were clear. He had to spar with Chan Renshui again. Although she cared for him deeply, if his cultivation talent or character fell short of her expectations, she wouldn't hesitate to cast him aside. That was the real reason she'd arranged for Huliana to teach both him and Chan Renshui new combat techniques. He wanted to protest. Why this endless cycle of cultivation tests? But he couldn't disobey Bibi Dong. Rationalizing that Chan Renshui hadn't actually killed him last time, he felt the tension drain away. A little sparring wouldn't kill him. Besides, he could use the match to refine his 3,000 Thunders technique, and Bibi Dong would surely soothe his wounds with her healing arts afterward. In the end, it wasn't such a bad deal. With that thought in mind, Shi Feng's mood lightened. He remembered the sudden burst of speed he managed when Chan Renshui had chased him last time, and a spark of excitement lit in his eyes. This time, I might just break through my limits in 3,000 Thunders, he whispered to himself. Without another word, he stepped outside and began to test his power. Shi Feng sighed in frustration. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't recreate the moment he'd shared with Chan Renshui. Disappointment washed over him. He'd wished to prolong her chase just a little longer. Forget it, he muttered. I'll let her chase me again tomorrow. A few more rounds should do it. When he finally returned to his quarters, Huliana was already there. She surveyed his disheveled appearance and scowled. Before he could even close the door, she herded him straight into the bathroom. You're not going to bed until you've washed up, she ordered. Her voice echoed down the hallway. Shi Feng resisted. He really didn't want to go to bed yet, but he splashed water over his face, scrubbed off the grime, and emerged half an hour later to find a delicious meal laid out on the desk. 3 times a day, footmen delivered meals here, Huliana had explained earlier. Now, seeing the perfectly arranged dishes, Shi Feng couldn't help but marvel at the craftsmanship. The aroma alone was enough to make his stomach growl. He dove in, savoring each bite. When he finally set down his chopsticks, he wiped his mouth and looked at Juliana in amazement. "Master, what exactly is this place? It feels more like a 5-star banquet hall than a training camp." Juliana's expression turned grave. She placed her chopsticks on the table and leaned forward. "This," she said quietly, "is Spirit Hall's training ground for geniuses." Juliana's expression was solemn as she spoke. "Survive it, and you'll become one of Spirit Hall's most prized talents. But don't underestimate it. If you enter with your current strength, you'll be dead within minutes." Shi Feng frowned. "Wuhundian Academy is supposed to train geniuses. How can it be a death camp?" She shook her head. "They're completely different. The academy refines talent. The death camps forge it. Their goal isn't just to teach skills, but to harden the mind. A genius who emerges from the camps, battle-scarred and unbreakable, is worth 3 graduates of the academy." Curiosity flared in Shi Feng's eyes. "Senior sister, did you fight a lot of people while you were inside?" Juliana's gaze drifted to the window as she recalled her own ordeal. "I spent 3 brutal years there, and came within an inch of death 9 times. I killed 20 peers in single combat. Out of our entire cohort, only 3 of us made it through, and I was one of them. That's how ruthless it is." She paused and glanced back at him, concern softening her features. "You're still so young, Shi Feng. I don't want to see you thrown in there underprepared. It really is a narrow path between life and death." Shi Feng wasn't the least bit worried. After all, he'd never been intimidated by anyone his age. Noticing his calm expression, Juliana pressed, "You're not afraid?" "Terrified," he replied with an amused smile. "I'm worried I'll just mow everyone down the moment I pee inside." Juliana rolled her eyes. "With that attitude, you won't last 3 days." He stifled a laugh. "Then teach me something useful, senior sister." She considered him for a moment. "If I could boil it down to one rule, it would be this. Trust no one. Stay alert at all times." Shi Feng nodded. He respected his own strength, but arrogance had toppled many before him. He filed her advice away carefully. Once they'd finished eating, Juliana moved to meditate. "Shi Feng, if you truly want to grow stronger, you'll need to train harder than ever. Come, practice with me." She settled on the edge of the bed, legs crossed. Her lightweight trousers rode up just enough to reveal the smooth skin of her thighs, lending her an unexpected, subtle allure. The air around her seemed to hum with focus and power. Shi Feng stood before her, determination shining in his eyes. This was just the beginning. Shi Feng cleared his throat. "Senior sister, I'm used to cultivating in open spaces." With that, he slipped off the balcony rail and sprinted away. The makeshift balcony was really just the roof of the neighboring building on the 2nd floor. Once he'd put some distance between them, Shi Feng collapsed to his knees and let out a long, relieved breath. Natural charmers had an almost supernatural pull on anyone who crossed their path. No wonder he, a mere child, found her hard to resist. Deep down, he knew Juliana meant no harm. Her bewitching aura was simply part of who she was. Juliana hurried after him and came to a stop at his side, her head tilted in puzzlement. "Is this the first time you've seen someone who prefers to practice outdoors?" she asked softly. Shi Feng turned to answer, and froze. In that instant, Juliana caught sight of 2 ivory fangs glinting at the corners of his mouth, his eyes as black as ink, and his fingernails sharpened to dangerous points. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke, the air between them crackling with unspoken revelations. Shi Feng sat cross-legged on the raised stone platform, bathed in the soft silver light of the moon. His crimson eyes were closed in concentration as pale ripples of energy radiated from his body. At the foot of the platform, his senior sister, Juliana, hovered hesitantly. "Senior sister," Shi Feng said without opening his eyes, "there's nothing to worry about. My martial soul only grows stronger under moonlight." Curiosity sparked in Juliana's gaze as she leaned forward and lightly touched the 2 slender fangs protruding from his lips. "So it's true," she murmured. "Shi Feng, those fangs of yours, they're not just for show, are they?" He opened one eye and offered a faint smile. "They're meant for biting, and they're laced with highly potent venom." Juliana's eyes went wide with alarm, and she stumbled back several steps. She'd heard whispers that his martial soul was poisonous, but she never imagined the toxin would flow through his teeth. Recovering her composure, she bowed respectfully. My apologies for disturbing you. I won't interrupt your cultivation any further. Please be sure to rest once you've finished. With a graceful leap, Juliana vaulted onto the balcony railing and returned to her own bed to resume her practice, leaving Shi Feng alone under the luminous glow of the moon. Chapter 55. Feeling hollowed out. When the urge to urinate roused him from sleep in the dead of night, Shi Feng blinked groggily and tapped his inner vision to light the way. The room was cloaked in shadow, but his eyes easily made out the shapes in the half-darkness. He slid silently back into the bedroom and froze. On the bed lay Hulina, freshly finished with her cultivation and already asleep, curled onto her side with her knees drawn up. Moonlight streamed in through the window, illuminating the gentle curve of her hips and the soft fabric of her pink shorts. But there was a tear at the back of the shorts, a neat round hole through which a thick, bushy tail looked out. It wound forward between her legs and then looped around her arms as if she were clutching it for comfort. Her brow was knit in tension. Every few seconds she trembled, a low whimper escaping her lips, as though she were trapped in the grip of a nightmare. Shi Feng's heart clenched. He remembered how not long ago she had been freed from the infamous death camp, and now the memories still haunted her in her sleep. She looks so helpless, he whispered to himself. He stepped closer, unsure whether to wake her, but the sight of her shivering form, clutching her own tail like a lifeline, kept him rooted to the spot. He could almost feel her fear, as though it were swirling inside his own chest. Is the death camp really that horrible? He wondered, voice echoing in his mind. Standing there in the pale light, Shi Feng resolved to learn everything he could about that tormenting place, and to help Hulina chase away her nightmares, no matter what it took. Since arriving in this world, Shi Feng had never taken a life, but he'd learned quickly how merciless survival here could be. The so-called death camp was infamous for its cruelty, yet he felt little shock at its horrors. Unless an opponent was utterly defeated or posed no threat at all, he would not hesitate to kill. So long as he wasn't overwhelmed or ambushed, he remained confident no one could easily fell him. Last night, after quelling a small uprising among the lower ranks, he'd chosen not to rouse his charge, Juliana. Instead, he slipped outside under the moonlight and continued his cultivation drill. As for Juliana's nightmares, he trusted they'd fade in time, once her spirit grew stronger. By dawn, Shi Feng returned to their cramped barracks to find Juliana already awake and watching him intently. Xiaoxue, she breathed, you practiced the entire night and you still look fresh as a daisy. How do you do it? Meditation drained one's spiritual power, and those with weaker souls fatigued quickly. At 6 years old, Juliana could hardly manage more than a couple of hours at a stretch. Yet here was Shi Feng, her age, yet able to sustain focus through the darkest hours under the moon. He dipped his chin in a modest bow, planting his back against the rough timber wall. My martial soul resonates with moonlight. Training beneath its glow actually invigorates me. Fatigue becomes optional. He poured water from a battered metal basin and took a slow sip. Outside, the first rays of morning squeezed through the cracks overhead. Together, they sat in comfortable silence, hearts steady, ready to face whatever trials the camp and this harsh new world would throw at them next. I know what this is. Martial soul mimicry training, Shi Feng explained, settling the scroll on the table. It can drastically speed up cultivation. Lena's eyes lit up with envy. Young Feng, with this method, you're bound to become extraordinarily powerful. Shi Feng waved a hand dismissively. I'm not aiming that high. My target is just to reach level. Lena blinked. You mean 100 levels? Master said that hitting 100 levels has been nothing but legend for thousands of years. Shi Feng rubbed the bridge of his nose. Indeed, breaching the 100-level barrier was a feat so rare that even geniuses who received divine inheritances only managed to scratch the surface. Without a godly legacy to bolster him, it would be exponentially harder. He recalled the monstrous Tang San. Forced by sheer will, he had skyrocketed to level 99, creating a miracle only to stall there forever. Still, Shi Feng had one major advantage, the system. Could that be enough to push him beyond what even Tang San had dared attempt? As he pondered the implications, Lena suddenly leaned forward, her perfume-rich breath warm against his cheek. Her caring gaze flickered with an intimacy that made Shi Feng's heart skip a beat and reminded him that some challenges weren't measured in cultivation levels at all. Shi Feng hesitated for a moment, then managed a polite nod. "She's beautiful, senior sister." Hulina's eyes sparkled. "Then why don't you seem affected by my charms?" Shi Feng swallowed hard. I guess my willpower's pretty strong." "Is that so?" She laughed lightly, fluttering her lashes. "Then will you help me with my cultivation?" Shi Feng blinked. "Sure, how can I help?" Juliana stepped closer, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper. "It's simple. Every day I'll test a new way to boost my allure on you. You'll tell me whether my charm has increased." Shi Feng's face went pale. "You do that every day?" With a grin, Juliana flicked her hand, and her martial soul manifested in a soft, enticing swirl of petals around her. She struck a teasing pose. "Of course. How else will I know I'm making progress?" Shi Feng's heart pounded in his chest. "Senior sister, please." Before he could finish, she reached out playfully, drawing him closer. He yelped in alarm and bolted for the door, but Hulina's laughter echoed behind him as she caught his sleeve. "Senior sister can't help herself," she teased. "Ah!" Shi Feng's voice trailed off into panicked squeaks as she tugged him back into the room. At midday, Shi Feng sat at the dining table, staring blankly at his untouched bowl of congee. His face was drawn and pale, as though he'd only just recovered from a grave illness. Across from him, Juliana chatted animatedly with the others, utterly untroubled by her morning's experiments. Shi Feng clenched his chopsticks, recalling how his soul had been tormented, even though in body he was only 6 years old. Whatever cultivation path Juliana followed, he prayed it would spare him from any more rigorous testing. Shi Feng sat at the table, unease knotting his stomach. If Juliana kept up her teasing, he worried it might stunt his physical and mental growth. Yet relief washed over him at the thought that in just a few days she'd be off to Wuhundian Academy. Juliana leaned back, a teasing smile on her lips. "You're something else," she purred. "Almost everyone falls under my charm, but you always slip away. Tell me, are you by any chance secretly a girl?" Her gaze drifted over him with an eager, probing glint, as if challenging him to resist. Shi Feng's heart raced. Without a second thought, he abandoned his bowl and chopsticks and bolted from the room, determined to put distance between himself and her tests. "I'm going to train with senior sister," he shouted over his shoulder. Julina's laughter followed him. She curled one lip and murmured, "You'll see, no one can resist me forever." Then she turned her attention elsewhere, leaving Shi Feng to sprint toward the sanctuary of the training ground. Shi Feng found his way back to the martial arts arena without a hitch this time. The courtyard lay silent and empty. Qian Renshui was nowhere to be seen. "She's probably off eating lunch," he murmured, noting it was only midday. With no sign of her, he strolled over and settled into the small pavilion at the arena's edge. As he sat, he revisited yesterday's sparring match and Qian Renshui's fierce determination to beat him. His irritation had faded overnight. After all, she'd grown up desperate for her mother's love, yet Bibi Dong had met her with nothing but cold indifference since childhood. Qian Renshui's resentment, Shi Feng realized, was entirely understandable. An idea suddenly took hold of him. Perhaps, by using his own position and influence, he could help reunite mother and daughter before it was too late, preventing a tragic reconciliation that only comes after death. In his previous life, he'd read accounts of such regrets and even wept over them. Now, here was a real chance to set things right, and he was determined to try. Shi Feng knew that whatever plan he devised, it needed to be precise, and the greatest obstacle was Bibi Dong. If she could be persuaded to make the first move, everything would fall into place. But how to ease the knot in her heart? He still hadn't figured that out. Frustrated, he set the problem aside for the moment and lay back to rest. After a hearty meal, rigorous exercise would only do more harm than good. He needed to recover from the mental strain Juliana had inflicted on him. No sooner had he closed his eyes than he drifted into a shallow sleep. About 30 minutes later, Qian Renshui swept into the empty martial arts arena. She frowned at the deserted training mats. She'd been waiting here all morning for Bibi Dong, and her patience was wearing thin. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a movement in the gazebo. Silk-light footsteps carried her across the floor in an instant, and she came to a halt beside Shi Feng's sleeping form. To her surprise, his facial wounds had already mended, but his posture was oddly slack. A delicate thread of silvery silk trailed from the corner of his mouth, catching the light as it wound down his cheek and pooled in a small glimmering puddle on the floor. Qian Renshui's brow furrowed in concern. Whatever trance or technique Shi Feng had fallen under, it was more mysterious and more dangerous than she had imagined. Chapter 56. Qian Renshui breaks down. Shi Feng's small body trembled, his lips parting in soft whimpers as he fought to stay upright. The sight stopped Qian Renshui cold. Only yesterday, she'd unleashed her anger on this innocent child. A wave of guilt washed over her. Should she apologize? Before she could decide, Shi Feng's eyes fluttered open. Frozen in surprise, he bolted upright, panic written across his face. He lurched backward, expecting another scolding. But Qian Renshui simply stood there, her harshness from yesterday replaced by a thoughtful calm. She studied him for a moment, then asked quietly, "You don't think your teacher will show up and defend you, do you?" Shi Feng shook his head. "She's a titled Douluo. She wouldn't come to bully you. She's far more concerned with protecting her own disciple." Qian Renshui sank to the ground with a bitter laugh. "Protector of her disciple, and what about me? Am I nothing in her eyes?" Shi Feng hesitated, then whispered, "She cares more for her chosen student than she ever did for me." Qian Renshui's composure cracked. Tears welled up, glinting like shattered glass. Her voice trembled. Is that how little I matter?" Moved by her pain, Shi Feng took a step forward. "Renshui, are you all right?" Qian Renshui bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. For the first time since they'd met, her pride gave way to genuine sorrow, and Shi Feng found himself wishing he could erase every hurt she'd ever felt. "Everything's fine." Qian Renshui's mood settled, her earlier agitation giving way to a gentle calm. "I was in a foul temper yesterday and snapped at you. I'm sorry." Shi Feng blinked. In surprise, he hadn't expected an apology. He shrugged and grinned. "I'm okay. Really. Look at you, pouting like a little piglet." He scrunched his nose in mock disgust. Qian Renshui couldn't help smiling, and instantly the distance between them seemed to shrink. "What's your name, little one?" she asked softly. "I'm Shi Feng. And you, Miss?" "Qian Renshui." "Miss Qian," Shi Feng said, tilting his head curiously, "what's your relationship with my teacher?" Qian Renshui's expression hardened at the mention of Bibi Dong. "Her? I just call her sister." Shi Feng nodded solemnly, leaning in with all the earnestness of a child delivering a secret. "She really cares about you. When she falls asleep, she mumbles, 'Xiaoxue, that's you,' over and over." Qian Renshui froze for a moment, then let out a sharp laugh. "Does she?" Her dismissal rang false, though a faint blush betrayed her true feelings. "Then it must be you." Qian Renshui froze, her pulse racing, as she met Shi Feng's earnest gaze. He looked entirely sincere. There wasn't a trace of jest in his expression. A thrill of excitement surged through her chest. She gripped his shoulder and gave it a firm shake. "You're not joking, right? It's really true?" Shi Feng nodded. "Yes. She went all the way to Notting City to pick me up, and on the ride home she dozed off and kept murmuring your name." It wasn't exactly a lie. Bibi Dong had whispered Qian Renshui's name in her sleep once or twice, but not nearly as often as Shi Feng suggested. The moment she heard his confirmation, Renshui felt her heart crack. A flood of long-suppressed emotions surged up, and tears sprang to her eyes. "I have to see her," she said, springing to her feet. Shi Feng reacted instantly, catching her arm. If she confronted her teacher like this, it would only end in a blow-up and deepen the Cold War that was already beginning. Renshui stared at him, confused. "Why not? I just want to know what happened." "Please, sit down and let's talk it through," Shi Feng said, gently guiding her back onto the bench. Renshui's pulse raced, but at least for now, she stopped fighting him. "Renshui, from what you told me earlier, it sounds like your teacher barely pays any attention to you, doesn't she?" Qian Renshui's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected Shi Feng to be so perceptive. After a moment, she gave a slow nod. "Yes," she admitted, her voice faltering. "That teacher is actually my mother, and she's never shown me so much as a hint of affection. I can't remember the last time she smiled at me. Whenever I'm near, she's cold and distant. Sometimes I even catch a flicker of disgust in her eyes. I'm her own daughter. Why would she look at me that way? Does she have a heart of stone? Tears welled up in Qian Renshui's eyes and then spilled over. In that instant, her brittle composure shattered. Her slender shoulders shook as sobs racked her body. Standing before an innocent boy like Shi Feng, she no longer felt the need to hold back. All her pain and loneliness poured out in unrestrained grief. Shi Feng offered her a few tissues with a gentle, sympathetic smile and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Hey, don't be sad. Qian Renshui let loose the grief she'd carried for years. With each word, her shoulders relaxed and her tears began to slow. At last, she took the tissues with a small, grateful smile. Thank you, she murmured, dabbing at her cheeks. There's a reason I didn't want you to go talk to my teacher right away. Intrigued, Shi Feng asked, Oh, what's holding you back? Qian Renshui looked up, her eyes bright with curiosity. Shi Feng leaned forward, his voice soft but earnest. In her dreams, she calls you by name. That means, deep down, she cares for you very much. Yet in her waking life, she's always distant and cold, as if she's determined to hide her feelings. But think, is there any mother in the world who truly doesn't love her daughter? Something must be stopping her from showing it. Her fingers tightened around his. What could it possibly be? Qian Renshui whispered, hanging on his every word. Shi Feng shook his head. I still don't know exactly what's causing your problem, he admitted softly, but I do know of a story that mirrors your situation almost perfectly. Would you like to hear it? Qian Renshui nodded eagerly, her eyes wide with hope. There was once a single mother with 2 little boys who adored each other. Their home was filled with laughter and warmth, until one fateful day when her youngest son drowned. Grief-stricken, the mother sought out a fortune-teller. He told her that her fate was too harsh, that she herself had, unwittingly, caused her son's death. He warned that if she didn't suppress her love, her remaining son would be next. Trusting his words, the mother withdrew. She stopped comforting her elder boy, never hugged him, never spoke kindly. Yet each night, alone in her room, she wept silently and prayed, begging for forgiveness and the safety of her child. The boy, confused by his mother's coldness, nonetheless remained bright and optimistic. He continued to care for her, to offer smiles and small kindnesses. Bit by bit, his unwavering love broke through her despair. She realized the fortune-teller's lies had almost ruined them. In the end, mother and son reconciled, and their little family found joy and peace once more. By the time Shi Feng looked up, he saw Qian Renshui wiping tears from her cheeks. Gently, he offered her a few extra tissues. Take your time, he said quietly. Chapter 57. Better to be cherished. Although I don't know why the teacher has been so distant with you, she must have her reasons, Shi Feng said thoughtfully. If you go to her directly, her coldness might only grow worse. She'll bury whatever warmth she has left, just as in that story about the mother. Qian Renshui's eyes filled with tears. Then what should I do? Shi Feng offered a reassuring smile. Don't worry, leave it to me. I'll find out exactly what's holding her back and loosen that knot in her heart. I promise you, I'll help you and your mother rebuild your relationship. Shi Feng, thank you. Deeply moved, Qian Renshui threw her arms around him. His face flushed crimson as he gently pushed her away. You don't have to be so formal. Just call me Xiao Feng. Qian Renshui laughed softly. All right, then you can call me Sister Xue. Okay, Sister Xue. Well then, Xiao Feng, she said, stepping back and giving him an encouraging nod. I'll leave everything in your hands. Don't worry, Sister Xue, I'll do my best. Despite his words, Shi Feng's heart fluttered with uncertainty. Teacher Bibi Dong's emotional walls had always been formidable, and breaking them down would be no easy task. Once the seal is broken, mother and daughter will finally reconcile. And even if Qian Renshui later learns that Bibi Dong was responsible for her father's death, with Shi Feng there to guide her, I'm confident that once she understands Bibi Dong's tragic past, she'll find it much easier to forgive and to accept the truth. Qian Renshui reached out and gently stroked Shi Feng's cheek. I beat you up pretty badly yesterday, she said softly. Are you still sore? Shi Feng shook his head. Not at all. In fact, could you beat me again today? Qian Renshui stared at him in disbelief, then hurriedly pressed her palm to his forehead. Did I beat you senseless? He grinned. Master told me he'll be sending me to a death camp in a few days, and that I should learn how to take a beating from you. Didn't you notice yesterday? Under your pressure, my potential finally broke through, and my speed shot way up. Qian Renshui remembered the look on his face as he kept smashing his head against the wall. She burst out laughing so hard the branches overhead trembled. Just moments ago, she'd poured out her worries to Shi Feng, and he'd promised to help her untangle Bibi Dong's past. In that instant, Qian Renshui realized she already considered him her closest ally. With a teasing smile, Qian Renshui said, "In just a few days, my sister will leave the Wuhun Hall for a distant assignment. If you're hoping to spar with her, you've only got a little time left. And don't expect to beg for mercy when she lands a solid hit." Shi Feng laughed and strode onto the arena floor. "Real men don't yelp at the first bruise," he called back, raising his fists. "Come on, sister. Give it everything you've got." Shi Feng watched the tension slip from Qian Renshui's shoulders, her features lighting up in a carefree smile. She strode into the martial arena and summoned her angelic weapon, its blades glinting like polished moonlight. "Shi Feng," she teased, "how do you want my sister to tear into you today?" He grinned. "Just like yesterday, push me as hard as you can. Only one rule, don't strike me in the face." Qian Renshui cocked her head, studying him. "Easy enough, but with how fast you move, I'd bet your martial soul is some kind of agile beast, right?" Shi Feng shook his head. "Not at all." Calmly, he released his soul power. In an instant, his limbs stiffened, his skin taking on a pale, eerie sheen, and a violet ring of light spun into existence above his head. Qian Renshui's mouth fell open, disbelief shining in her eyes. "A 1,000-year soul ring, Shi Feng? How did you—" He allowed himself a small, triumphant smile, recalling the confident line Bibi Dong had taught him. Qian Renshui's astonishment only deepened as she hurried a step closer, peering up at that radiant ring. After a moment, she shook her head in wonder. "You're even stronger than my sister." Shi Feng hovered in midair, his eyes tracking every subtle movement his sister made. Qian Renshui's brows were drawn together as she studied the spirit ring display hovering before her. She'd awakened with a soul power of level. Yet in her single-minded pursuit of stronger spirit rings, she refused to rush into breakthroughs, preferring instead to temper her power over the past 2 years. Still, her first 2 spirit rings hadn't even reached a century's age, let alone a millennium. Shi Feng felt his pulse quicken. Qian Renshui had only begun absorbing spirit rings at 8 years old, and by 11, she'd already shattered through to level 38. Monsters like her didn't belong in the same cultivation hall as ordinary disciples. She swiveled her cold gaze toward him. "You have a rare martial soul," she observed, "and there's a chilling aura woven into it. When you mature, you'll turn heads, especially among the ladies." With a light grin, she hovered closer, eyes sharp as daggers. "All right, let's begin. Death camps aren't playgrounds. I won't go easy on your training." Shi Feng inclined his head once, then relaxed his soul force, letting his dormant martial soul recede. Today, he only needed to focus on the 3,000 Thunder Techniques footwork, no soul awakening required. Their chase began much as it had yesterday. Qian Renshui darting away like a streak of moonlight, Shi Feng in hot pursuit. But the tension between them felt different now. No sparring blows were traded, no testing jabs thrown. In this new balance of respect and rivalry, each step, each feint, drew them closer to mastering their true potential. Shi Feng had never met anyone as relentless as Qian Renshui. A level 38 soul master whose martial soul took the form of an angel, her specialty was speed, and she proved it in yesterday's sparring match. Though her speed amounted to barely half of his own, she refused to hold back a single strike. When her fists connected, Shi Feng only grinned. He had anticipated her ferocity. True to his guess, under Qian Renshui's unyielding pressure, the latent power of his Sanqian Leidong technique flared again and again. Each burst brought him closer to unlocking the hidden depths of his soul, and he could literally feel a mysterious force stirring within him. Yet Qian Renshui would press on until Shi Feng was on the verge of collapse. Then, ever considerate, she'd allow him a brief respite before demanding he continue. She claimed it was all to help his cultivation. But in truth, she was far more indefatigable than he was. Shi Feng found himself caught between agony and exhilaration, a strange blend of pain and joy he'd never experienced. Now, as evening crept in, The two of them sat side by side in a small wooden gazebo overlooking the training grounds. Shi Feng wiped the sweat from his brow and began to speak in a low, even tone. You know the story of Cinderella, right? She fled the palace so abruptly that her magic spell wore off. She even left one of her crystal slippers behind. Xiaoxue propped her chin in her hand, her violet eyes widening as she listened. The gentle glow of lantern light danced across her features. She was utterly engrossed. Shi Feng couldn't help but smile. Despite the day's grueling training, he found teaching her far more rewarding than any sparring session. Shi Feng glanced up at the sky as dusk settled in. Shuer, it's almost dark. I'd better head back now. I'll continue the story tomorrow. Xiaoxue, utterly absorbed, shot him a pleading look. No, you can't leave me hanging. Did the prince finally find Cinderella? What became of her wicked stepmother and those stepsisters? I need to know. Did they get their comeuppance? Shi Feng forced a wry smile. Really, if I don't get home soon, my senior sister will scold me for missing dinner. Before he could finish, Xiaoxue grabbed his sleeve and gave him a fierce look. If you don't wrap it up tonight, there'll be no training session for you tomorrow. As the younger sister of Douluo, she'd grown up deprived of any real childhood joy. She couldn't bear to leave the tale unresolved. With a resigned sigh, Shi Feng settled back down beside her. He spent the next half hour narrating the final chapters of Cinderella, how the glass slipper fit perfectly, the stepfamily's disgrace, and Cinderella's happy wedding. At last, Xiaoxue's anxious expression melted into a satisfied smile. Eyes shining with excitement, she turned to him. Xiaofeng, do you have any more stories? He nodded. Plenty. There's Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, The Little Match Girl, even the legend of Xu Xian and the White Snake. Which one shall I tell next? Chapter 58, The Trial of Willpower, 4th update. I'll tell you tomorrow. Shi Feng glanced back over his shoulder as he ran. Renxue, cradling her chin, looked up at the dusky sky. All right, she called after him, but you'd better be here early. No excuses. I will, he promised, but before she could reply, he was already sprinting away. Renxue watched his retreating figure with a half-amused shake of her head. Where does he get all these tall tales? She murmured to herself. Not far down the path, Shi Feng nearly collided with Sister Lina, who was pacing in restless circles. Senior sister, he exclaimed, hurrying to her side. He stopped short and pressed a hand to his stomach. I'm starving, he admitted in a pitiful whine. Without warning, Lina grabbed his ear and gave it a sharp twist. Do you know how worried I was? I just got back, and you're already off on some wild goose chase. If you disappear on me again, I'll march straight to the teacher. Shi Feng winced, rubbing his ear where it throbbed. He forced a wry smile. Despite her harsh tone, he could feel the genuine concern beneath it. After a moment, Lina softened, releasing him and smoothing her expression. How are things, then? She asked, her voice gentler now. Shi Feng straightened, ready to fill her in. The trial of his willpower was only beginning, and with friends like Renxue and Lina watching his back, he felt more determined than ever. Are you hurt? Shi Feng shook his head and offered her a small, reassuring smile. I'm fine, really. Hu Liana's brow eased. Good, come on, let's eat before the food gets cold. She fussed around the table with all the attentiveness of an older sister, and for the first time in either of his lives, Shi Feng felt truly cared for. The simple warmth in her voice and the gentle way she helped him up from the ground struck something deep inside him. Memories of neglect and loneliness from his past flooded back, making Hu Liana's kindness even more precious. But as he watched her hover over the meal, a pang of anxiety crept in. He remembered the tragic fate that awaited her, and how powerless he would be if he did nothing. And then there was Tang San, the oblivious boy with no notion of how to treat a girl as special as Hu Lina. Shi Feng, clenched his fist beneath the table. If Tang San didn't learn to appreciate her properly, perhaps it would fall to Shi Feng himself to intervene and protect Hu Liana from heartbreak before it was too late. After dinner, Hu Liana escorted Shi Feng back to Bibi Dong's quarters. When Bibi Dong saw that his face bore no trace of yesterday's beating, she couldn't hide her surprise. She'd expected Renxue to take out her frustrations on him once more. Did she not hit you at all today? Bibi Dong asked, leaning forward. Shi Feng shook his head. She did, just once, but afterward she healed me. Bibi Dong frowned. Didn't she yell or lose her temper? Not at all, Shi Feng said. In fact, she apologized for going too far yesterday. Once she understood why I came, she spent the entire afternoon training with me. Bibi Dong fell silent, her expression inscrutable. Shi Feng didn't know what she was thinking, but after a moment she smiled and turned to Hu Liena. Nana, you'll be leaving for Wuhandian Academy in 3 days. Spend the next few days with Fenger. Of course, teacher, Hu Liena replied. As she spoke, a reluctant tug at her heart reminded her how much she would miss this place, and the two people who had become as dear to her as family. All right, everyone, head back now, and don't forget to practice your soul power tonight. Later, back at the residence, Shi Feng showered quickly and slipped out to train. He barely dared to spend a moment near Hu Liena's side. Paradoxically, the more he kept his distance, the more Hu Liena's desire to win him over intensified. This wasn't a typical romantic conquest. She simply wanted to bind Shi Feng to her charm so completely that he could never pull away. Early the next morning, Shi Feng returned ahead of schedule and happened to pass by Hu Liena's room. Through the half-open door, he saw her foxtail retracting. Intrigued, he paused. He himself wielded a beast-type martial soul, one that let him sprout animal features, sometimes longer ears, sometimes a tail. He wondered why Hu Liena's soul manifested so freely in her sleep. Did she feel especially safe here, or was it a lingering habit from the harsh life she'd known before? Either way, the sight only deepened his curiosity about the mysteries of beast martial souls. Hu Liena's figure was nothing short of perfection, her waist so slender it could be encircled with one hand, the curve from her back to her hips exquisitely poised. The moment her foxtail slipped back into place, 6-year-old Shi Feng inadvertently saw more than he should have. Flushing, Hu Liena draped her coat around herself as if nothing had happened. To her, he was still just a child, innocent, naive, and utterly incapable of grasping the implications of what he'd glimpsed. After breakfast, Hu Liena's vigilance only sharpened. Just as Shi Feng tried to slip away, she caught him by the wrist and, without a word, resumed her rigorous and admittedly ruthless experiments. Meanwhile, Qian Renshui finished her morning meal and headed straight for the martial arts arena. Yesterday, she'd insisted that Shi Feng arrive early. What began as a simple training exercise had grown into something she found profoundly moving, a small love story unfolding before her eyes. Now, an hour had passed, and he still hadn't shown. Frowning, she rose from her seat. Perhaps he'd overslept again. In that case, she thought, a few light spanks would be in order once she tracked him down. After all, her transfer to the concentration camp was imminent, and she had precious little patience for tardiness. Qian Renshui had already learned the way to the pontiff's private chambers, and since Bibi Dong was away on urgent Wuhun Palace business, the room should be empty. With no one to stop her, she slipped inside. She crept through the ornate bedchamber, lantern light dancing off lacquered screens until a faint, pleading voice reached her ears. It was Shi Feng, whom she regarded as no less than a younger brother, begging, his tone ragged with distress. "Senior sister, please, no! Senior sister, let me go! I can't take this anymore!" Renshui's heart pounded. The idea of anyone mistreating Shi Feng filled her with rage. She hurried toward the smaller pavilion where he lived, the spirit cries growing louder with each step. Suddenly, a low, girlish giggle, heavy with flirtation, drifted from within. Renshui froze, pulse racing. For a moment, the laughter's strange, seductive quality held her in place. Then she shook her head, banishing the spell as quickly as it had come. Steeling herself, she moved to the doorway, determined to confront whoever dared to harm Shi Feng. Qian Renshui felt barely any tug from Hu Liena's charm. After all, she was a woman, and the enchantment naturally weakened against her. She'd heard rumors that Bibi Dong had taken on a fox spirit disciple, but she'd never actually seen one, much less witnessed such seductive sorcery in action. Fury flared across her face. How dare this vixen prey on a 6-year-old boy? Of course Shi Feng couldn't resist such a potent spell. He'd already fallen half under her sway. Rage coursed through Qian Renshui's veins as her spirit energy surged. With a single, powerful kick, she launched herself from the ground floor up to the second story. The door splintered on impact, and she crashed into the room. Inside, Shi Feng was slumped on a plush sofa, bound by invisible chains of arcane force. Before him stood Hu Lina, her 9 swishing tails a blur of motion. 2 glowing soul rings hovered in the air, pulsing in time with her bewitching dance. Shi Feng's eyes glazed over as Hu Lina wove her seductive patterns. Then he'd snap back to awareness, struggling to break free, only to be drawn under again. Qianrei's chest tightened with righteous anger. She would not let this continue. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need the full chapter text that you'd like rewritten. Could you please paste the entire passage here? Once I have it, I can transform it into a polished, coherent English version with your requested name change. Page 76. Qian Renshui's eyes flared with rage. She activated her martial soul in an instant and unleashed her first spirit skill, Angel, sending a blazing golden fist hurtling toward Hu Lina. The door split off its hinges before Hu Lina even had time to register the intrusion. She stared in disbelief at the strange girl charging through her doorway and then braced for impact. 3 glowing spirit rings hovered around Qian Renshui's arm. Hu Lina recognized them immediately. This was the girl training alongside Shi Feng. She didn't hesitate. With a swish, her fluffy tail ignited in scarlet light as she triggered her maximum charm ability. Qian Renshui faltered, momentarily dazed by the sudden onslaught. But Hu Lina was already gone. She'd vanished from the path of that golden fist. Hu Lina reappeared at Qian Renshui's flank, her lips curling into a cold smile. She realized at once that her charm wouldn't hold the other girl long. Anxiety pricked at her heart. A dagger glimmered in her hand. "Stop!" Shi Feng roared, bounding to his feet. At the sound of Shi Feng's voice, both Qian Renshui and Hu Lina paused. They shot each other a wary look, and in perfect unison drew back their martial souls. Shi Feng pressed a hand to his temple, blinking up at the 2 worried faces before him. Qian Renshui had just hurried across the courtyard to drop into the seat beside him. "Xiao Feng, are you all right?" she asked, voice thick with concern. Renshui's eyes flicked to Hu Lina, who was standing awkwardly off to one side. "Is that how you treat your junior brother? He's still just a kid." Hu Lina's cheeks flamed red. True enough, she'd thoughtlessly used Shi Feng to test out the potency of her charm technique, but she never expected Renshui to leap to his defense so fiercely. Shi Feng winced. Hu Lina's seductive aura had been a pressure he could barely bear, but oddly, every wave of that torture seemed to steel his resolve rather than break it. Bit by bit, he found himself resisting her advances more effectively. He didn't want to see these 2 sisters fighting over him. "Renshui," he said with a gentle smile, "I'm really fine. I was in the confinement chamber. Senior sister was guiding my willpower through a trial. You've got the wrong idea." Qian Renshui studied him skeptically. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Absolutely." She eyed him for a long moment, then asked, "Then why did those shouts just now sound like, like you were in agony?" His cheeks warmed at the memory. "I had to push myself to the brink. Only by shattering my limits can I become stronger." Senior sister always says that people with strong willpower can't be fooled, and that they meet every hardship with even greater courage. Qian Renshui's cheeks flushed as she took in Shi Feng's words. She turned to Hu Lina, mortified. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you're the one training Feng." Hu Lina gave her a kindly shrug. "No harm done. It's good to see you care about him." Shi Feng stepped forward and gently guided Qian Renshui back. "You'd better head home now, Sister Shuer. I'll come find you this afternoon." Qian Renshui nodded. "I'll be waiting. Early." She paused, shooting a look at Hu Lina. "Take care of Feng's willpower training. Don't hold back. Be as ruthless as you like." With that, she spun on her heel and hurried away, cheeks still hot with embarrassment. No sooner had Qian Renshui vanished around the bend than Hu Lina strolled up to Shi Feng, a teasing smile on her lips. "You're full of confidence." "Very well. Senior sister will continue your willpower training." Shi Feng met her playful challenge without a flicker of doubt. "By all means, senior sister. Feel free to use any method you prefer." Chapter 59, Parting. Shi Feng's 3 days of training had been both grueling and exhilarating. Each morning, Hu Lina tested his resolve with a series of charm-based illusions. Each afternoon, Qian Renshui put him through the paces in real combat drills. Time passed in a blur of sweat and steel. On the morning of the 4th day, Hu Lina silently packed her belongings and escorted Shi Feng down from the Pope's palace. At the foot of the mountain pass, she paused. Bibi Dong, surprisingly, was nowhere to be seen. Shi Feng, Huliana said, her voice soft but urgent. Every time you enter the death camp, the challenges change. My one piece of advice remains the same. Trust no one and stay on guard. Shi Feng offered her a wry smile. Senior sister, that's the 800th time you've said it. Her emerald eyes flickered with worry. Just promise me you'll return in one piece. I'll be waiting for you at Wuhundian Academy. He gently urged her toward the waiting carriage. Don't worry. I've still got my own training to finish. I'll take care of myself. Hulina nodded, climbed in, and settled onto the bench. As the carriage rumbled to life, she pressed her hand against the open window. Shi Feng raised his palm in return. When the carriage turned the corner and slipped out of sight, he stood alone beneath the rising sun, steeling himself for the trials ahead. Wuhundian Academy lay at the heart of Wuhan City, and once you enrolled, you were essentially sealed off until the next holiday. Shi Feng watched the carriage bearing senior sister Hulina roll away, a reluctant tug at his heart. It had taken Huliana 3 long years to emerge from the internment barracks, and he realized with a pang that it had been nearly as long since he himself had escaped those same walls. When he returned to his empty quarters, the memory of those brutal days resurfaced. The girl who'd tormented him for days on end was nowhere to be found, and suddenly the room felt hollow. Shi Feng shook his head, determined not to dwell on Huliana's departure. He slipped on his boots and set off toward the training grounds, where Qian Renshui waited. Over the last 3 days, what had begun as a sparring pursuit had escalated into a full-scale duel. Shi Feng had unlocked the secret of the Sanqian Thunderstep, honing his speed to a level few could match. After activating his first soul skill buff, he witnessed Qian Renshui's astonished gaze. Your speed, she admitted flatly, rivals that of a level 20 Great Soul Master, truly top tier. Shi Feng allowed himself the faintest of smiles. With his newfound mastery, he was more determined than ever to push his limits and to discover just how far his thunderous steps could carry him. At the start of their duel, Qian Renshui had only just stabilized her power at the Soul Master tier, yet Shi Feng immediately seized the advantage, driving her to the ground and laying into her with unrelenting force. From that moment on, she never again underestimated him. Determined to close the gap, she elevated her cultivation into the great Soul Master realm. Drawing on a vast well of soul energy and unleashing 2 devastating soul techniques, she at last brought Shi Feng to heel. As she stood over him in victory, however, awe and disbelief warred in her eyes. Her own talent was nothing short of monstrous, evident not only in the blistering pace of her advancement, but also in her unrivaled combat prowess among equals. Shi Feng moved like a whirlwind, yet despite her soul great master-level power, Qian Renshui could only keep him contained. No matter how fiercely she struck, she couldn't land a truly damaging blow, and that was precisely her intention. She hadn't come to injure him, but to give him hard-won battlefield experience. Holding him in check was more than enough. Before today, Shi Feng had faced real opponents only twice, both times against Tang San. He'd mastered the lightning fist in training, but true mastery only comes through the fires of combat. Only there can raw technique fuse with instinct. Under Qian Renshui's astonished gaze, he only grew stronger. With every exchange, his speed quickened, his strikes gained weight, his reflexes sharpened, and his tactical awareness deepened. Unwittingly, Qian Renshui ramped up her own soul power to match him, nearly touching the threshold of a soul master herself. Blow after blow, they fought until at last, Shi Feng's spiritual reserves were completely spent. Only then did they break apart, both of them breathing hard, sweat glistening on their skin. Qian Renshui leaned against the railing of the pavilion and wiped a bead of sweat from her brow. Her eyes shone with admiration. Shi Feng, you really are incredible. Shi Feng stood at the edge of the training arena, watching Qian Renshui stretch. Her pale workout clothes clung to her slender frame, damp with sweat, and every curve was accentuated in the late afternoon light. He averted his gaze, cheeks flushing. Thanks for sparring with me these past few days, Sister Shuer, he managed, voice a little hoarse. I feel like I'm 5 times stronger than before. Qian Renshui flashed him a teasing grin as she sauntered closer. With a swift motion, she pinched his cheek playfully. You little pervert, she chided. Back when my sister reached the Soul Master realm, she still couldn't match you in combat. Once you hit level 20, you'll be trading blows with Soul Masters in no time. She was so close that Shi Feng caught a faint whiff of her floral shampoo, and for a moment the world seemed to tilt. He shook his head, regaining his composure. Speaking of my sister, Qian Renshui's smile faltered, and her tone turned serious. She's leaving tomorrow. Shi Feng blinked in surprise but said nothing. He knew Qian Yishui had duties waiting elsewhere, most likely an assignment in the Tiando Empire to shore up its dwindling forces. He watched Qian Renshui gather her gear, determined to make every moment of her final evening count. Then when will you come back? Shi Feng asked, even though he already knew how this was supposed to play out. Qian Renshui shook her head, expression gentle but firm. I can't say for sure, maybe a few years, maybe a dozen. Shi Feng's heart tightened. And if I miss you when you're gone? For a moment, Qian Renshui was silent, reluctant to leave this bright-eyed boy she cared for so deeply. But duty called her away. Finally, she said, grow stronger first, then go to your teacher. If she grants permission, you'll be able to come find me. I'll train hard, Shi Feng promised, determination lighting his eyes. I'll get stronger quickly. A warm smile curved Qian Renshui's lips. She pulled him into her arms. No matter what happens, you'll always be my little brother. Buried in the softness of her embrace, Shi Feng didn't pull away. After a moment, he remembered something. You mentioned another story yesterday, the one about Liang Shanbo and Romeo. Can we finish it for my sister? Qian Renshui nodded. Shi Feng settled himself and began to speak, his voice soft as he recounted that tragic love story, one that had brought countless listeners to tears. In the end, he said, the tombs of Liang Shanbo and Romeo split open at the same instant, and from each emerged a brilliantly colored butterfly, fluttering together into the sky. Moved by the power of their love, the two souls transformed into butterflies, destined to flutter side by side for all eternity, never to be separated. A bittersweet smile played across Qian Renshui's face, but tears still streamed down her cheeks. Shi Feng watched helplessly. She had already exhausted every tissue he'd offered, yet she couldn't stop crying. A heart-wrenching romance is a potent weapon against young girls. No matter how strong they seem, everyone has a soft spot. Even Qian Renshui, usually so composed and unshakable, found herself undone by the tale. Shi Feng's story had ignited in her a passionate longing for the future. She dreamed of becoming the heroine of her own love story, bound forever to her soulmate. Chapter 60. Putting on the dress. Shi Feng, do you think I'll ever meet someone I truly love? Qian Renshui asked softly, her pale fingers brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He met her gaze and nodded without hesitation. Of course you will. You deserve nothing less than happiness, and someday you'll share your life with someone who loves you as deeply as you love him. A gentle smile curved Renshui's lips. She reached out to stroke his hair. Thank you, Shi Feng. You've given me some of the happiest moments I've ever known. I promise I will never forget you, or the stories we've woven together. I could say the same, he replied, his voice low but earnest. She hesitated, then pressed her hand against his chest. When are you leaving tomorrow? I wish I could see you off. Shi Feng's heart clenched. Renshui shook her head. You don't have to. This mission is strictly confidential. I can't risk anyone knowing about it, not even you. Understanding flickered in his eyes, then he stepped back. He studied her from head to toe, as if he could imprint her image on his very soul. Renshui held his gaze with equal intensity, silently pleading to be remembered. Night fell, and they parted ways under a canopy of stars. As Shi Feng walked away, the truth settled in his chest like a stone. In his past life, and in this one, he had already fallen hopelessly in love with Qian Renshui, a woman whose strength shielded a fragile heart. Shi Feng knew that after several years of adventuring beyond the sect's borders, Qian Renshui would only grow stronger, both in her martial prowess and in her spirit. If he truly wanted to ensure her happiness, he had to become powerful enough to protect her. Watching his two senior sisters depart one by one, a sharp pang of loneliness struck him, but he quickly banished it. In a few days, he would be walking into the death camp itself, and he couldn't afford to be distracted. Emotions were natural, but in moments like these, one had to keep sight of the goal. That night, as before, Bibi Dong did not summon him. Instead, Shi Feng retreated to the courtyard of his modest quarters and settled into a low stance, the pale moonlight dancing over his blade. Thoughts of Qian Renshui briefly flared in his mind, but he forced them aside. He would forge himself into an unbreakable shield, for her sake, and for the trials that awaited him. Only by tempering his will and sharpening his skills could he hope to survive the horrors of the death camp, let alone emerge strong enough to protect those he cared for. With that resolve burning in his chest, he began his training anew. In Bibi Dong's study, Qian Renshui stood before her adoptive mother, her expression torn. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said softly. Bibi Dong didn't look up from the scrolls in her hand. She gave a single nod. "I know. The Bishop of Saras has been transferred to the Temple of Heaven in Do City. You can contact him if you need anything. I'll pass along any messages you send." She flipped another page, her tone dismissive. "You're free to go." Qian Renshui's heart pounded. She clenched her fists, then forced herself to speak. "Then I'll take my leave. Mother, please take care." At the word mother, Bibi Dong's fingers twitched. It had been years since anyone dared call her that. She set the documents aside and finally met Qian Renshui's hopeful gaze, but her eyes were ice. A faint flicker of menace lurked beneath her calm. "Don't ever call me that again," Bibi Dong said quietly. "I have work to do. If you're finished, step aside." She turned back to her papers, her dismissal absolute. Disappointment lingered in Qian Renshui's eyes as she recalled Shi Feng's words. She bit back the questions burning on her tongue, forced a composed expression, and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she glanced back and froze. Bibi Dong's face was a tangle of emotions, her lips parted as though she wanted to speak but couldn't force the words out. At that moment, relief flooded Qian Renshui's chest. Shi Feng hadn't deceived her. Her mother must be hiding some unbearable burden. Shi Feng was right, Qian Renshui whispered to herself, voice trembling with newfound conviction. "There's something my mother can't tell me. Everything rests on you now." And with that, she dashed away. Behind her, Bibi Dong sagged into a chair, utterly spent. Tears slipped unchecked down her cheeks, an unguarded moment no one would have expected from the formidable jagged pope. Qian Renshui paused on the threshold, a surge of regret washing over her. She had steeled her heart to remain distant, yet after that single call with her mother, her resolve crumbled into aching sorrow. Qian Renshui's mother always told herself that the child she carried was nothing more than the spawn of that beast, something alien and unconnected to her. She convinced herself she felt no love for her daughter. Yet what mother can remain unmoved when, after 10 months of pregnancy and the agony of childbirth, a tiny life enters the world? Her hatred had long since buried that maternal instinct deep in her heart, but in the dead of night, when resolve falters and walls grow thin, grief would well up, and she would weep for what she refused to acknowledge by day. Later, as Qian Renshui passed by Shi Feng's residence, she couldn't help but glance upward. There, on the rooftop, he sat cross-legged, practicing with serene focus. Even in youth, his silhouette was straight and unyielding, and the sight of him filled her with a reluctant ache. They had shared only a few days together, yet Shi Feng had already imprinted himself on her heart. She had bid him farewell that afternoon. Neither wanted to prolong the sorrow of parting. After one final, lingering look at his back, Qian Renshui turned away and slipped quietly into the night. Shi Feng curled his lips into a wry smile as he settled into his cultivation session. Now that Qian Renshui had decided never to see him again, there was no point in a tearful farewell. Besides, in 2 or 3 days, if nothing else intervened, teacher Bibi Dong would have him shipped off to that infamous death camp. The very thought spurred him on. He didn't look for Qian Renshui the next morning. She'd likely slipped away quietly before dawn. Aside from meal breaks and short rests, Shi Feng spent the entire day in the training courtyard behind Bibi Dong's quarters, honing his boxing and body techniques. According to Qian Renshui, at his current 14th level of cultivation, his combat strength already ranked among the very strongest in the Great Soul Master realm. But she didn't know about his true secret weapon, his poison. Long before he'd absorbed any L rings to advance further, Shi Feng's corpse poison had already made quick work of Jing Wuming, a level 19 cultivator. In an instant, The poison had laid waste to Jing Wuming's body, leaving him utterly helpless. That horrifying display was proof enough of just how lethal Shi Feng's poison truly was. Shi Feng suspected that his corpse poison was virtually irresistible to anyone in the Great Soul Master realm, save for those rare masters whose martial souls could neutralize toxins or auxiliary soul masters skilled in detoxification. Still, its true strength could only be proven in practice. Lately, without Hu Lina and Qian Renshui to guide him through their joint training sessions, Shi Feng felt uncharacteristically sluggish, but Cultivation brooked no excuses. That evening, just after supper, a maid arrived to summon him. Shi Feng frowned. Could Madame Dong wish to discuss the death core again? He wondered as he followed the maid through winding corridors. Before long, it dawned on him that they were not heading toward the study. "Sister," he asked, puzzled, "where are you taking me?" The maid bowed her head respectfully. "Madame Bibi Dong awaits you in her private chambers, young master." A few minutes later, Shi Feng stood outside Bibi Dong's bedchamber. The maid closed the ornate door behind her and slipped away. He pushed it open and found himself in a vast room, several times the size of Hu Lina's girlish quarters. Rich crimson drapes hung from carved beams overhead. Polished rosewood cabinets and lacquered screens formed tasteful alcoves. Elegant scrolls and delicate porcelain vases hinted at the lady's refined tastes. The air was hushed, charged with expectation. Madame Bibi Dong sat at a low table by a lattice window, her posture composed, her gaze upon him. Shi Feng cleared his throat and stepped forward, ready for whatever awaited him. This was Shi Feng's first time here, so he couldn't help but feel curious. Bibi Dong sat perched on the edge of her plush bed, something small and delicate cradled in her hands. The moment Shi Feng laid eyes on her, a peculiar sensation washed over him. Shi Feng's heart thudded in his chest. Something about Bibi Dong's behavior today felt utterly wrong. He couldn't explain why he was suddenly overwhelmed by an urge to flee. Then she lifted her head and looked at him, her normally steely gaze rimmed with red, as if she had just been crying. Shi Feng blinked in surprise. The iron-blooded Pope had tears? And if so, why? And for whom? Before he could puzzle it all out, Bibi Dong's gentle, sweet voice rang out. "You're here. Come over here quickly." Her soft smile was so disarming that Shi Feng's panic subsided. He stepped forward and saw what she was holding, a tiny white dress patterned with delicate blossoms, clearly meant for a 5- or 6-year-old girl. Alarm bells went off in his mind. Something was very, very wrong. Bibi Dong guided him to stand beside her and crouched down. In a voice almost tender, she said, "Xiaoxue, look, this is the skirt Mommy bought for you. Do you like it?" Shi Feng's heart froze. "Xiaoxue? Mommy?" He swallowed hard as a cold wave of dread washed over him. Whatever was happening, it was far worse than mere mistaken identity, and there was no telling how to set things right. Chapter 61. Spending the Night with Mom. Shi Feng blinked blearily at the sight before him. Bibi Dong, all smiles, held a delicate silk skirt up to his waist. "Just look at this color on you. It's absolutely perfect," she cooed. "No, master, Shi Feng stammered, raising his hands in front of his chest. "I'm not Qian Renshui. My name is Shi Feng, and I'm your new disciple, Xiao Chen." Bibi Dong merely laughed, mistaking his protest for modesty. "Nonsense. My daughter Qian Renshui is so charming, but you, my dear, are going to be even prettier. Come here and let Mom help you try it on." Before Shi Feng could leap back, her slender fingers were already at the buttons of his robe. His heart raced as she began unfastening them one by one. "Mad woman!" he gasped, scrambling to his feet. Without another word, he darted for the door. Her chamber was deceptively vast, nearly 20 meters long, and Shi Feng hadn't covered half that distance when the air around him suddenly compressed like a vice. A crushing weight bore down on his shoulders, pinning him face first to the floor. He tried to wriggle free, but even moving a finger felt impossible. A soft, triumphant chuckle drifted from the far end of the room. "Where do you think you're going, my little disciple?" Bibi Dong's voice was gentle, but the pressure she exerted through her grandmaster's aura left no doubt of her power. Shi Feng lay on the cold stone, chest heaving, acutely aware of just how outmatched he was. As Bibi Dong glided forward to adjust the skirt's waistband, he realized there was no escaping by force. He would have to find another way to get his message across before it was too late. Bibi Dong drifted over with a soft smile and reached out to tap the tip of Shi Feng's nose. "Such a mischievous boy," she teased. The instant her palm brushed his face, a surge of soul energy pulsed through him. A crushing weight lifted, but Shi Feng realized too late that he couldn't move. Neither his body nor the magic within him would obey. Before he could even blink, Bibi Dong had swept him back onto the bed and was stripping off his clothes. Panic welled in his chest. He was a man, not a child, yet he was utterly helpless, unable to cover himself, unable to cry out. He searched her eyes silently, begging her to stop, but she paid him no mind. Instead, she picked up a neatly folded skirt, as though she intended to dress him in it. Then she paused, her brow furrowing. "You're filthy," she said, tossing the garment aside. "Let's get you cleaned up first." Still unable to speak or move, Shi Feng was swept into the bathroom. Bibi Dong guided him into the warm tub and began to scrub away the grime of his afternoon training. Sweat and dust rose in soft clouds around them as she worked with methodical care, while Shi Feng, helpless and stunned, could only lie there and endure. Shi Feng's heart pounded in his chest as he trailed Bi and Bibi Dong, half expecting her to snap at any moment. He'd seen her sudden mood swings before, and he feared the worst. Yet tonight, she seemed oddly calm. Fresh from her bath, she smelled of jasmine, the loose silk of her pajamas clinging provocatively to her curves. "I'm doomed," he thought. She motioned him into the bedroom and stopped in front of a white dress patterned with delicate blossoms. His face went blank, his eyes hollow. This special treatment for children, she'd called it, and he'd rather have none of it. Before he could protest, Bibi Dong guided him to the vanity. With methodical care, she brushed his hair, then wove it into twin braids. Next came the makeup, pale pink lipstick to his lips, a faint rose tint to his cheeks. He'd always had a soft face, but under her ministrations, he looked more like a real girl than many of his classmates. "It's late," she murmured, stepping back to admire her work. "Sleep with me tonight." Shi Feng's stomach clenched. He'd never felt so powerless and so utterly exposed. "I'd be happy to help polish the chapter. Could you please provide the full text you'd like me to rewrite? Right now, I only see one line, so I'll need the entire passage to produce a coherent, idiomatic English version." Bibi Dong poured onto Shi Feng all the love she had long denied Qian Renshui. Perhaps it was the cloak of his false identity that gave her the courage to let go. Shi Feng guessed she'd finally been overwhelmed by emotion, pulled in by the impulse she'd been fighting for so long. Of course, these were only his conjectures. A man can never truly know what stirs a woman's heart. That night, Bibi Dong simply curled up against him and fell asleep. Shi Feng, however, lay awake. He watched her breathing soften, noticed the faint sparkle lingering on her long lashes, and felt something shift inside him. In that quiet moment, he realized the truth. Beneath her cold exterior, Bibi Dong had always cared for Qian Renshui, but her resentment had been stronger than her affection, forcing her to bury her feelings deep. Now, having finally released those bottled-up emotions, her smile was soft and unguarded. Shi Feng knew that once dawn broke, she would likely don her usual icy composure and resume treating Qian Renshui with her characteristic chill. Yet, for tonight, just for this one night, she had allowed herself to remember the love she thought she'd lost. Shi Feng had never experienced forced possession before, so he couldn't share in Bibi Dong's agony. Still, anyone watching would see how undeserving Qian Renshui was of a life filled with such cruelty, and that injustice stoked Shi Feng's determination. No matter how slim his chances, he was resolved to uncover the truth behind Qian Renshui's mother and daughter, and to liberate them both. He spent the entire night wide-eyed, too tense to sleep, until exhaustion finally claimed him just before dawn. When he stirred again, it was nearly noon. Bibi Dong was gone. Shi Feng sat up, quickly doing a thorough body check. Nothing was missing, and let out a long, shaky breath of relief. He peeled off the borrowed skirt, swapped it for his own clothes, untied the elaborate braids woven into his hair, and made a beeline for the bathroom. There, he scrubbed away the streaks of red face paint until his reflection was his own once more. Only then did the tension finally begin to drain from his shoulders. He paused for a moment at the threshold of that nightmarish room, where he'd been forced to endure Bibi Dong's presence all night, then turned on his heel and slipped out. Without a word or a summons, he headed straight back to his residence, already plotting his next move to save Xianren and her mother. That evening, after another hazy day of cultivation, Bibi Dong dispatched her maid once more. Shi Feng's heart thudded in his chest as he followed, half expecting a repeat of last night's awkwardness. To his relief, the maid led him straight to Bibi Dong's study. Inside, Bibi Dong was absorbed in a stack of documents. When Shi Feng stepped in, she lifted her chin slightly. "You've arrived." Shi Feng bowed respectfully. "Yes, teacher. How may I assist you?" She seemed to have forgotten her behavior from the previous night. Rising from her seat, she crossed the room and stood before him. "The registration for the death camp closes tomorrow. You'll depart then. I'll assign someone to see you there." "Understood," Shi Feng replied. Bibi Dong knelt to smooth the folds of his robes. Her voice softened. "Of all my disciples, you are the one I believe in most. Your talent even surpasses Nana's. I want you to survive the death camp and return as the Spirit Hall's brightest new star." Shi Feng met her gaze with steady resolve. "Teacher, I promise I will come back." A faint smile curved Bibi Dong's lips. "No need for long goodbyes. I won't see you off in the morning." Chapter 62, Death Camp. "Someone will come to fetch you," Bibi Dong said as she rose gracefully. Shi Feng's heart raced. He hadn't expected such an abrupt summons. Before he could reply, she continued in a softer tone. "I've come to make you a promise. If you conduct yourself well from here on out, I will do everything in my power to see you named the Holy Son of Wuhan Temple. Of course, you must earn it yourself. Work hard, and don't let that me down." The weight of her words struck Shi Feng like a thunderbolt. The title of Holy Son was on par with the Holy Maiden, and only a Holy Son or Holy Maiden could be chosen as the next pope. Such a destiny was more than he had ever dared hope for. "Thank you, teacher. I promise I won't disappoint you," he said earnestly. He had never been one to ignore the allure of honor or power. Strength was his ultimate goal, and with greater power, his path to true greatness would be that much smoother. Bibi Dong nodded. "One more thing. I've already spoken with the chief instructor at the death camp. During your training there, you'll be allowed a single request for his assistance. Use it wisely. That's the only favor I can secure for you." A surge of gratitude filled Shi Feng. Bibi Dong's intervention had given him a precious advantage, an extra lifeline that could very well tip the scales in his favor. With renewed determination, he bowed deeply. This opportunity was one he would seize with everything he had. Shi Feng stood before Bibi Dong, her stunning features suddenly clouded with worry. "Xiao Feng," she said softly, "you must never tell anyone what happened last night. Do you understand?" He swallowed hard, fear tightening his chest. "I understand. This stays between you and me. No one else will ever know." "Good," she replied, relief flickering across her face. "Now go. I want to see how you perform." As he walked back to his quarters, Shi Feng felt neither dread nor regret. Instead, his heart thrummed with anticipation. When he first pledged himself to Bibi Dong, it had been awe of her power that bound him. Now, however, he welcomed whatever lay ahead, eager to prove his loyalty and strength in the training camp she had commanded him to join. At dawn, sunlight spilled over the courtyard just as Shi Feng reached his room. A stern-faced, middle-aged officer waited below the stairs. Shi Feng shouldered his small satchel. Inside, only the barest necessities. The faint scent of Juliana still lingered in the pink-walled chamber, and for a moment he paused, memories of their grueling sparring sessions rushing back. Steeling himself, he gathered his bag and descended. The day's first orders awaited, and with them, the next chapter of his life under Bibi Dong's watchful gaze.